The gunshot shattered the Wyoming twilight like breaking glass. Charlotte Hale didn't flinch. She'd learned long ago that fear was a luxury women couldn't afford in her father's house. Judge Edmund Hale lowered his smoking revolver, his eyes cold as tombstones. "You're dead to me," he said, voice flat as the plains stretching beyond his empire. "Gone by sunrise, or I'll have you dragged out." Behind the stables, Adam Cooper's hands tightened on his horse's reins. He'd heard everything, and he'd already made his choice. Before we begin this tale of forbidden love and desperate flight across the untamed West, I invite you to join me on this journey. Stay until the end to discover how their story unfolds, and please, comment below with the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story has traveled across the world. The thing about power, Charlotte Hale had learned, was that it made men forget their daughters were human. She stood in her father's study, a room that smelled of leather, whiskey, and the particular kind of authority that came from owning half of Willow Creek, Wyoming territory. The afternoon light slanted through the windows, illuminating dust motes that danced like tiny witnesses to her sentencing. Judge Edmund Hale sat behind his massive oak desk, a piece of furniture that had traveled 2,000 miles by wagon train, surviving everything the frontier could throw at it, unlike his daughter's place in his heart, apparently, which had proven far more fragile. "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" The judge's voice was measured, controlled, the same tone he used when sentencing horse thieves to hang. His silver hair was immaculately combed despite the frontier setting, his black suit pressed sharp enough to cut. Everything about Edmund Hale spoke of civilization imposed upon wilderness through sheer force of will. Charlotte met his gaze without flinching. At 23, she'd inherited her mother's auburn hair and green eyes, but the steel in her spine was purely her own making. "I spoke to a ranch hand, Father. I didn't commit murder." "You spoke to him." The judge's hand slammed down on the desk, making the oil lamp rattle. "That drifter, that nobody, after I explicitly forbade any contact with the hired men. Do you understand what people are saying, what they're thinking? That I'm a human being who expressed gratitude when someone showed me kindness?" Charlotte's voice remained steady, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "Mother died 6 weeks ago. Adam Cooper was the only person besides you who offered condolences. He said he'd lost his mother young too, and that he was sorry for my pain. That's all, Father. That's the extent of my crime." Edmund Hale rose from his chair, all 6 feet 3 inches of frontier justice personified. He'd been a lawyer in Boston before the war, had come west with Charlotte's mother in 1858, seeking fortune and finding it in land, cattle, and the kind of influence that came from being the only educated man of law within 200 miles. Willow Creek had grown from a trading post to a proper town largely because Judge Hale had made it so. Writing contracts, settling disputes, occasionally hanging men who couldn't be settled with words. The town respected him. The territory respected him. And Charlotte, his only child, his late wife's mirror image, had just publicly defied the careful social order he'd spent 17 years building. "You don't understand," he said, his voice dropping to something almost like sorrow. "Almost, but not quite. Everything I've built here, everything your mother and I created, it rests on perception, on respectability. The judge's daughter doesn't fraternize with cowboys. She doesn't give the gossips ammunition. She doesn't—" He stopped, jaw working as he fought for control. "She doesn't make me look like a fool who can't manage his own household." "Is that what this is about?" Charlotte's laugh was bitter. "Your pride?" "This is about survival." Edmund moved to the window, staring out at the sprawling ranch that bore his name. 10,000 acres of prime grazing land, 300 head of cattle, a dozen horses, and the big house that declared to all who saw it that the Hales had conquered this wild country. Out here, reputation is currency. Lose it, and you lose everything. I won't have 17 years of work destroyed because my daughter developed tender feelings for a saddle tramp. "I don't have tender feelings for Adam Cooper," Charlotte said, though even as the words left her mouth, she wondered if they were entirely true. "He was kind to me. In a house suddenly empty of kindness, that mattered." Her father turned, and for just a moment she saw grief flicker across his face. The loss of his wife. The woman who'd softened his harder edges, who'd made the big house feel like a home instead of a monument. Then the shutters came down. and Judge Hale was back, implacable as the mountains. "Pack your things," he said flatly. "You'll leave at first light. I'm sending you to my sister in Philadelphia. Catherine will see you properly situated, perhaps find you a suitable husband who can overlook this indiscretion." Charlotte's blood turned cold. "You're sending me away?" "I'm giving you an opportunity to start fresh, away from the damage you've done here." He returned to his desk, pulling out a leather wallet and counting bills with the precise movements of a man who'd made this decision hours ago, maybe days. "I've arranged passage on the stage to Cheyenne, then the train east. You'll have an allowance. My sister will present you in proper society. With luck and discretion, this entire unfortunate episode can be forgotten." "I won't go." The words came out stronger than Charlotte felt. "This is my home. Mother is buried here." "Your mother would have understood the necessity of this." Edmund's voice softened fractionally. "She knew what it took to maintain position in an uncertain world. She would have wanted you protected, properly married, secure. She would have wanted me happy." Charlotte's hands clenched at her sides, nails digging into her palms. "She would have wanted me to have choices." "Happiness is a luxury, Charlotte. Security is essential." The judge returned to counting bills. "You leave at dawn. Samuel will drive you to the stage station. I'll write to Catherine tonight. By summer's end, you'll thank me for this." The dismissal was clear. Charlotte stood there a moment longer, looking at her father, really looking at him, and seeing a stranger, or perhaps seeing him clearly for the first time. This man who'd taught her to read, who'd let her sit in on court sessions when she was young, who'd once called her his clever girl. That man had disappeared into grief and pride and the terrible fear of losing control. "You're making a mistake," she said quietly. "The only mistake I made was being too lenient with you after your mother passed." Edmund didn't look up from his counting. "Dawn, Charlotte. Don't make me send men to ensure your compliance." She left the study with her head high, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her cry. The hallway stretched before her, suddenly unfamiliar. This house she'd grown up in, with its heavy furniture hauled across the plains, its curtains her mother had sewn, its walls that had witnessed her entire life. Tomorrow it would be a memory, and she would be exiled to a city she'd never seen, to live with an aunt she'd met once as a child, to be paraded before suitable men like livestock at auction. The injustice of it burned in her chest. Maria, the housekeeper who'd been with the family since Charlotte was 10, waited in the hallway. The older woman's weathered face showed concern, but she said nothing, just pulled Charlotte into a brief, fierce embrace that smelled of lye soap and bread dough. "Your mother would be proud of you," Maria whispered. "Standing up to him like that?" "Mother never stood up to him," Charlotte said hollowly. "Your mother picked her battles." Maria released her, glancing toward the study door. "And she won the ones that mattered. But this, he's frightened, mija. Frightened of losing you the way he lost her. Men like the judge, they don't know how to be scared, so it comes out as anger. Being frightened doesn't give him the right to exile me." "No," Maria agreed. "It doesn't, but understanding might help you survive what comes next." She pressed something into Charlotte's hand, a small leather pouch that clinked softly. "Your mother's jewelry. He had me lock it away after the funeral, said you'd get it when you married, but I think you need it now more than then." Charlotte clutched the pouch, tears finally spilling over. "Maria, go pack, child, and pack smart, practical things, not just pretty dresses. The world's harder than your father wants you to know." Maria's dark eyes held knowledge born of her own hard journey from Mexico to Wyoming. "And remember, dawn is hours away. A lot can happen between now and sunrise." The words carried weight Charlotte didn't immediately understand. She nodded, climbing the stairs to her room in a daze. Behind her, she heard Maria return to the kitchen, humming an old Spanish song about women who chose their own paths. Charlotte's room was exactly as she'd left it that morning, a lifetime ago, before her world had shattered. The bed with its wedding ring quilt her mother had made, the small bookshelf filled with volumes her father had ordered from back east, the window overlooking the ranch yard, where even now she could see men moving between the barn and the bunkhouse, tending to evening chores. One of those men was Adam Cooper. She couldn't see him from this angle, but she knew he was out there. He'd been working the Hale Ranch for 3 months, hired on in April when her father needed extra hands for spring branding. Unlike most drifters, Adam was quiet, competent, and notably literate. Charlotte had seen him reading by lamplight in the barn, actual books rather than dime novels. When she'd asked about it once, he'd smiled and said his mother had been a school teacher before she died, had made sure he valued learning even after he'd been orphaned at 14. That conversation had happened 2 weeks after her mother's funeral, when Charlotte had wandered out to the stables seeking escape from the suffocating grief inside the house. Adam had been mending tack, and his simple, "I'm sorry for your loss, Miss Hale. Losing a mother, there's no preparing for that kind of pain," had cracked something open in her chest. For 10 minutes, they'd talked about loss and memory. He'd shared a story about his mother teaching him to read using grocery circulars. She'd told him about her mother's laugh, how it had filled the house, how the silence now felt like drowning. It had been innocent, natural, human. And Judge Edmund Hale, watching from his study window, had seen not humanity, but threat. The specter of his daughter's reputation being compromised, his carefully constructed world beginning to crumble. Now, as Charlotte pulled her traveling trunk from under the bed, she wondered what Adam had thought when the judge had summoned him that afternoon. Had he known what was coming? The judge had interrogated him in the yard, loud enough that half the ranch hands heard. Charlotte had caught only pieces through her window, accusations of inappropriate contact, demands to know Adam's intentions, threats of being run off the property. Adam's response had been calm, respectful, and utterly devastating in its simplicity. "I spoke to your daughter, sir. I offered condolences. If that's a firing offense, I'll collect my wages and ride out tonight." The judge had let him go. No wages, no reference, just a snarled order to be gone by morning. 2 lives disrupted because Charlotte had dared to acknowledge grief with someone who understood it. She began packing mechanically, chemises, stockings, her 2 good dresses, the serviceable wool skirt and jacket she wore for riding. Her hands moved while her mind raced. Philadelphia. Aunt Catherine, who'd visited once when Charlotte was 12 and had spent the entire week commenting on how rustic everything was, how Charlotte needed to develop proper feminine accomplishments, how it was a shame Edmund had let his daughter grow up so wild. The thought of living under that woman's roof, being molded into something acceptable for Eastern society, made Charlotte's skin crawl. But what choice did she have? Her father controlled everything, her money, her future, her very ability to survive. Without his support, she had nothing. Nowhere to go. No way to earn a living. Women didn't have options, not really. They went where men sent them, married whom men chose, lived lives shaped by masculine decree. Unless, the thought crept in slowly, terrifyingly. Charlotte's hand stilled on the dress she was folding, unless she didn't wait for dawn, unless she refused to be sent away like an inconvenient package, unless she took Maria's words, "Dawn is hours away, a lot can happen," as the permission they were meant to be. Her heart began to pound for different reasons now. It was insane. Impossible. A properly raised young woman didn't run away into the wilderness. She didn't abandon everything she knew on the basis of principle and wounded pride. She certainly didn't. Charlotte's gaze fell on the window, where dusk was deepening into night. Beyond the glass, lanterns were being lit in the bunkhouse. Men were settling in for the evening. The ranch was winding down, preparing for sleep. And somewhere out there, Adam Cooper was packing his own meager belongings, preparing to ride out at dawn, unemployed, without references, cast out for the crime of being kind. The injustice of it crystallized something in Charlotte's chest. If she was going to be exiled anyway, if her father had already condemned her, why not choose her own exile? Why not ride out on her own terms to a destination of her own choosing, rather than be shipped east like cargo? The idea should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like the first deep breath she'd taken since her mother died. Charlotte abandoned the trunk and moved to her wardrobe, pulling out her riding clothes. The split skirt her mother had scandalously ordered from a catalog, the sturdy blouse, the jacket that could handle weather. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. Pack smart, not pretty. No, that had been Maria's advice. Her father wanted her decorative and compliant. She chose smart. Working quickly now, Charlotte bundled clothing into her mother's old carpet bag. Practical items that could be layered, that could handle rough travel. She added the small Bible her mother had given her, a silver-backed brush, the tintype of her parents on their wedding day. The jewelry pouch Maria had given her went into her jacket's inner pocket, buttoned secure. Money. She'd need money. Charlotte's saved pin money amounted to maybe $30, enough for a stage ticket, not enough to survive on. Her father's study had a safe, but she didn't know the combination. The household funds Maria kept in the kitchen would be missed immediately. Her mother's engagement ring sat in a small box on the dresser. Charlotte picked it up, the gold warm in her palm. Her father had returned it to her after the funeral, saying Charlotte should wear it when she herself became engaged. Looking at it now, she saw not sentiment but currency. Security. Insurance against starvation. "Sorry, Mama," she whispered, slipping it into the jewelry pouch, "but I think you'd understand." The house was quiet as Charlotte changed into her riding clothes, moving carefully to avoid creaking floorboards. Her father would be in his study, working through correspondence and drinking the whiskey that had become his evening companion since his wife's death. Maria would be in the kitchen, preparing tomorrow's bread. The ranch hands would be in the bunkhouse, playing cards or sleeping. No one would notice one woman slipping out to the stables. Charlotte braided her hair in a practical plait, pinned it securely, and settled her flat-brimmed riding hat in place. The face that looked back from the mirror was pale but determined, her mother's features arranged in an expression of resolve that was entirely Charlotte's own. She'd figure out where to go once she was riding, south maybe, toward Colorado, or west toward California. Anywhere but east, where her father's influence and her aunt's expectations waited to smother her. The carpetbag wasn't heavy, but it represented everything: rebellion, fear, freedom, and foolishness all tangled together. Charlotte took one last look at her room, the girlhood she was leaving behind, and slipped into the hallway. The stairs seemed impossibly loud. Each step creaked a warning. "You'll be caught. You'll be stopped. This is madness." But Charlotte kept moving, heart in her throat, until she reached the main floor. Light showed under her father's study door. She could hear him moving around inside, the clink of glass on wood. Drinking and brooding, probably composing his letter to Aunt Catherine, explaining his wayward daughter's fall from grace. Let him write it. Let him send it to Philadelphia. By the time it arrived, Charlotte would be long gone. The kitchen was dark, Maria having retired to her small room off the back. Charlotte paused, considering leaving a note, but decided against it. The less Maria knew, the less she could be blamed for. Better to let everyone think Charlotte had lost her mind, acted on impulse, left no conspirators behind. The back door opened silently. Maria kept the hinges well oiled. Night air rushed in, cool and sage-scented, carrying the familiar sounds of the ranch settling into darkness. Charlotte stepped out onto the porch, pulling the door shut behind her with exquisite care. Then she was moving across the yard, keeping to shadows, the carpetbag clutched in one hand. The stable loomed ahead, its doors standing open to catch the evening breeze. Inside, horses shifted and nickered softly, drowsy but aware. Charlotte's mare, a sweet-tempered paint named Clementine, was in the third stall. The horse raised her head at Charlotte's approach, ears pricked forward in pleased recognition. "Hey, girl," Charlotte whispered, setting down her bag to stroke the mare's velvety nose. "How do you feel about an adventure?" Clementine snorted softly, as if considering the question. Charlotte was reaching for the saddle when a voice behind her, low and careful, nearly stopped her heart. "Might want to take an extra blanket. Gets cold in the high country this time of year." She spun around, hand flying to her chest. Adam Cooper stood in the stable doorway, silhouetted against the dim light from the bunkhouse beyond. He'd already saddled his own horse, a rangy buckskin gelding, and his bedroll was tied behind the saddle. He wore trail clothes, not work clothes, and his hat was pulled low, shadowing his face. "You—" Charlotte couldn't finish the sentence. Her mind was reeling. Adam stepped into the stable, moving quietly. Up close she could see him better, lean face, dark hair that needed cutting, eyes that were brown in daylight but looked black now in the lamplight. He was maybe 30, weathered by sun and work, with a kind of quiet competence that came from a decade of surviving by his wits. "Saw you leaving the house," he said simply. "Figured you weren't going to wait for dawn and the stage to Cheyenne." Charlotte's mouth went dry. "You're going to tell my father." "No, ma'am, I'm not." Adam glanced toward the house, then back to her. I'm going to ask if you know how to use that. He nodded toward the rifle rack on the stable wall. Yes. My father taught me. Her mind was spinning, trying to understand what was happening. Good. Take one. And ammunition. Adam moved to Clementine's stall, beginning to saddle the mare with practiced efficiency. We've got maybe 3 hours before they realize you're gone. More if we're lucky and your father sleeps heavy. Either way, we want to be well clear of Willow Creek before sunrise. We? Charlotte stared at him. What are you talking about? Adam pulled the saddle girth tight, checked it, then turned to face her fully. His expression was serious, almost grim. Miss Hale, you're about to ride out alone into country where a woman traveling solo is asking for trouble. You've got maybe $30 to your name, no real plan, and winter coming on in a few months. Your father's going to send men after you, probably half the ranch hands plus whoever else he can hire. They'll track you down in a day, maybe 2, and drag you back. So? Charlotte's voice came out sharper than intended, fear making her defensive. Why would you care? My father already fired you. You should be riding in the opposite direction, getting as far from Hale trouble as possible. Something shifted in Adam's expression, a flash of something raw and honest. Because I've drifted for 7 years, Miss Hale. 7 years of working ranches and moving on, never putting down roots, never having a reason to stop. Then your mother died, and you came out to the stable crying so hard you couldn't see, and when I offered you a handkerchief and a kind word, you looked at me like I'd given you gold. He moved closer, his voice dropping. Then this afternoon, your father called me a saddle tramp, threatened to blacklist me from every ranch in Wyoming, and made it clear I was trash for daring to speak to his daughter. And I realized I've spent 7 years being no one, going nowhere. But if I ride out tonight with you, if I help you get somewhere safe, then maybe those 7 years were just waiting for a reason to matter. Charlotte couldn't breathe. The stable felt too small, the air too thick. You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. No, Adam agreed. But I know what it's like to be trapped. And I know that when someone's making a break for freedom, sometimes they need backup. He held her gaze steadily. I'm not asking to be your savior, Miss Hale. I'm offering to be your friend. Someone who can watch your back when you're too tired. Someone who knows the trails and the towns. Someone who can ride into places alone that you couldn't go without drawing the wrong kind of attention. My father will think you kidnapped me. Charlotte's voice cracked. Adam, he'll hang you if he catches us. Then we'd best not get caught. Adam returned to checking Clementine's saddle, his movements calm despite the enormity of what he was proposing. Look, I understand if you'd rather ride alone. It's your choice, always will be. But if you're willing to have company on the trail, I'm offering. No strings, no expectations, just, let's say 2 people who both need a fresh start, watching out for each other. Charlotte's hands were shaking. This was madness compounded by impossibility. Running away was one thing. Running away with a man, with a ranch hand her father had expressly forbidden her to speak to. That was scandal beyond redemption. If they were caught, her reputation would be destroyed. Adam would likely be killed. But Maria's words echoed in her mind. Pack smart, not pretty. The world's harder than your father wants you to know. And beneath that, her own realization. Adam was right. Alone, she'd be lucky to make it 2 days. With someone who knew the territory, who could hunt and track and navigate, her odds improved exponentially. If we do this, Charlotte said slowly, we can't be caught, ever, because there's no going back from it. I know. Adam's voice was steady. I'm counting on that. Something in his tone made Charlotte look at him sharply. She saw it then, the same thing she felt. The bone-deep weariness of living according to someone else's rules. The desperate hunger for something different, even if different meant dangerous. Where would we go? She asked. South toward Colorado first. Get out of Wyoming territory where your father's influence runs deepest. Then maybe west toward California or down into New Mexico. A lot of country out there, Miss Hale. A lot of places to disappear if you're careful. Adam handed her a canteen. Fill this. And that carpet bag. Repack it. You've got too much weight and clothes. Take 1 spare outfit, more ammunition, all the food you can carry without spoiling. Charlotte moved on autopilot, following instructions while her mind processed this sharp left turn in her plan. Adam worked alongside her, pulling supplies: dried beef, hardtack, coffee, a small pot. From his own saddlebags, he produced a rolled-up rain slicker and tied it to her saddle. "Won't you need that?" she asked. "I've got one. Every rider should have two anyway. Insurance." He glanced at her. "Can you shoot while riding?" "I've never tried." "Hope you don't have to learn." Adam finished securing her supplies, then turned to face her fully. In the lamplight, his expression was serious, but not unkind. "Last chance, Miss Hale. Once we ride out those doors, we're committed. Your father will call me a criminal. The law will back him. Every hand he sends after us will have orders to bring you home and deal with me however they see fit. We'll be running for months, maybe longer. It'll be hard miles and cold camps, and no guarantees we make it anywhere safe." Charlotte thought of Philadelphia, of Aunt Catherine's pursed-lipped disapproval, of being paraded before suitable men, her wilderness edges filed down until she fit properly into parlor conversation, of never having a choice again, never being asked what she wanted, never being anything but Judge Edmund Hale's disappointing daughter. Then she thought of her mother's laugh, of the books she'd read about women who'd crossed the plains in wagon trains, who'd homesteaded alone, who'd chosen hardship over helplessness. "My mother used to say that courage wasn't the absence of fear," Charlotte said quietly. "It was being terrified and doing the thing anyway." She looked up at Adam, meeting his eyes. "I'm terrified, but I'm doing it anyway. And yes, I'd be grateful for company on the trail." Something like relief crossed Adam's face. He nodded once, then checked the stable doors, listening. The ranch remained quiet. In the big house, a lamp still burned in the judge's study. "We go now," Adam said. "Walk the horses until we're clear of the yard, then mountain ride hard for the first hour. There's a creek 2 miles south. We'll cross it 3 times to confuse the trail. Then we head for the high country where tracking gets harder." Charlotte swung the lightened carpet bag over her shoulder, accepted the rifle Adam handed her, and took Clementine's reins. Her hands had stopped shaking. In their place came a strange calm, the clarity that came from irrevocable decisions. "Adam?" She stopped him as he moved toward his own horse. "Thank you. For this. For believing I had the right to choose, so..." He smiled then, just a flicker but real. "Thank you for giving me a reason to stop drifting, Miss Hale." "If we're doing this," Charlotte said, "you'd better call me Charlotte. Miss Hale is going to sound strange around a campfire." "Charlotte?" Adam tested the name, then nodded. "All right then, let's go find out what we're made of." They led the horses out into the Wyoming night, 2 people choosing exile over submission, gambling everything on their own stubborn refusal to be defined by someone else's fear. Behind them, the big house stood silent, Judge Edmund Hale unaware that his daughter was already gone, already becoming someone he wouldn't recognize, someone brave enough to risk everything for the simple dignity of making her own choices. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent and eternal. Somewhere in the darkness, their future waited, unknown, dangerous, and entirely their own. Charlotte Hale didn't look back. They crossed Willow Creek 3 times in the darkness, the cold water reaching Clementine's knees as Charlotte guided her mare through the current. Each crossing meant Adam doubled back, obscuring their tracks with brush, creating false trails that led nowhere. The work was slow, meticulous, and nerve-wracking. Every snap of a branch made Charlotte's heart leap. Every shadow could be a rider sent by her father. But the pursuit she feared didn't materialize. Not yet. By the time false dawn began graying the eastern horizon, they'd put nearly 8 miles between themselves and the Hale Ranch. Adam finally called a halt in a stand of cottonwoods, dismounting to check the trail behind them one more time. Charlotte slid from Clementine's back, her legs trembling from tension and exhaustion. She'd been awake since yesterday morning, more than 24 hours of emotional devastation followed by this desperate flight. "We're clear for now," Adam said quietly, returning from his reconnaissance. "No signs of pursuit. Either they haven't discovered you're gone, or your father's organizing a proper search party." He began loosening his horse's girth. "Either way, we push on after the horses rest. There's a line shack about 12 miles south, abandoned, but it'll have a roof. We can hole up there for a few hours, let the animals recover." Charlotte nodded, too tired to speak. She fumbled with Clementine's saddle, fingers clumsy with fatigue, until Adam's hands gently moved hers aside. "I've got this," he said. "You drink some water and eat something. Can't have you falling out of the saddle from exhaustion." "I'm fine," Charlotte protested, but even she could hear the lie in her voice. "You're running on fear and stubbornness." Adam pulled the saddle off, giving Clementine a thorough rub-down with handfuls of dry grass. "Both useful, but they'll only carry you so far. Food and rest carry you further." Charlotte sat heavily against a cottonwood trunk, accepting the canteen Adam handed her. The water was cold and tasted of iron, but it cut through the dust in her throat. From her saddlebag, Adam produced a piece of hardtack and some dried beef, setting them in her lap like offerings. "Not exactly a hotel breakfast," he said, with a hint of apology. "It's perfect." Charlotte bit into the hardtack, wincing at its tooth-breaking hardness. Around the mouthful, she asked, "How far behind do you think they'll be?" Adam settled across from her, chewing his own rations thoughtfully. "Depends on when they discovered you missing. If your father checked on you before bed, they could be hours behind. If he waited until morning, we've got until maybe 7 or 8 before the alarm goes up." He glanced at the brightening sky. "It's about 5 now. I'd say we have 2, maybe 3 hours before riders leave Willow Creek. And then? Then we stay ahead of them." Adam's voice was matter-of-fact, but Charlotte heard the steel underneath. "Your father will send men who know the country. They'll ride hard and they'll be motivated both by loyalty to the judge and by that $500 reward he'll likely post." Charlotte's hand stilled on her food. $500? That's what I'd offer if I were him. Enough to make every drifter and ranch hand within 50 miles start looking. They'll call me a kidnapper, you a victim. Makes it easier for them, morally speaking, when they come hunting. Adam met her eyes. "You need to understand, Charlotte, from here on out, we're the villains in their story. Your father will paint himself as the desperate parent, me as the criminal who took advantage. Truth won't matter. Only the version that lets everyone sleep at night." The words settled like stones in Charlotte's stomach. She'd known this intellectually, but hearing it stated so baldly made it real in a way it hadn't been before. "Do you regret it?" she asked quietly. "Coming with me?" Adam was quiet for a long moment, finishing his hardtack before answering. When he did, his voice was thoughtful rather than certain. "I regret that it came to this. That your father couldn't see his daughter as a person rather than a possession. I regret that showing basic human kindness became grounds for exile. But coming with you?" He shook his head slowly. "No, I don't regret that. For the first time in 7 years, I'm riding towards something instead of away from it. Even if that something is uncertain, it beats the hell out of endless drifting." Charlotte wanted to ask what he'd been drifting away from. What had set him on the road 7 years ago, but exhaustion was making her thoughts fuzzy. The adrenaline that had carried her through the night was draining away, leaving only bone-deep weariness. Adam must have seen it in her face. "Come on," he said, standing and offering a hand. "Let's get to that line shack. You can sleep while I keep watch. Then we'll switch." The 12 miles to the abandoned cabin felt like 100. Charlotte swayed in the saddle, jerking awake every time she started to slide sideways. The sun climbed higher, turning the cool morning into a warm day that made sweat run down her back beneath her jacket. The country grew rougher as they climbed into the foothills, sage and scrub oak giving way to pine and aspen, the air thinning as elevation increased. Finally, Adam pointed ahead to a weathered structure barely visible among the trees. "There. Hasn't been used in years, but the roof's solid." The line shack was a single room, maybe 12 by 15 feet, with a stone fireplace that looked like it hadn't seen fire in seasons. Someone had left a broken chair and a wooden crate that might have once held supplies. Dust covered everything, and something small skittered away into the shadows when they opened the door. "It's perfect," Charlotte said, and meant it. After hours in the saddle, even this rough shelter felt like luxury. Adam brought the horses around back where they couldn't be seen from the trail, rigging a picket line between 2 trees. Charlotte spread her bedroll on the least dusty section of floor, every muscle protesting as she lowered herself down. She meant to stay awake, to keep talking, to prove she could pull her weight on this desperate journey. Instead, she was asleep before Adam finished tending the horses. She woke to afternoon light slanting through cracks in the walls and the smell of coffee. For a disoriented moment, Charlotte thought she was back at the ranch, that everything had been a nightmare. Then reality crashed back, the banishment, the flight, the irrevocable choice she'd made. Adam sat near the door, keeping watch through a gap in the weathered wood. He'd made a tiny fire using dead grass and twigs, heating coffee in a small pot. The gun belt he wore had been hidden beneath his jacket the night before, but now she could see the well-worn Colt on his hip. "How long did I sleep?" Charlotte's voice came out rough with thirst. 4 hours, give or take." Adam poured coffee into a tin cup and brought it to her. "Drink this. We need to move soon. I saw dust on the back trail about an hour ago. Could be nothing, could be riders." Charlotte sat up quickly, ignoring her body's protests. "They found us?" "Don't know yet. Could be legitimate travelers, but I don't believe in taking chances." Adam returned to his watch post. "We'll give it another 30 minutes, let you wake up properly, then we ride. There's a town called Bitter Springs about 20 miles southwest. We can resupply there, maybe hear if there's word about us." "Won't that be dangerous?" "If my father's put out word, more dangerous to run out of supplies in the high country with winter coming." Adam glanced back at her. "Besides, nobody in Bitter Springs knows you. Your father's influence doesn't stretch that far. We go in separately, you dress down and quiet, me buying supplies. In and out before anyone connects us." Charlotte sipped the bitter coffee, feeling it cut through the fog in her head. 4 hours of sleep wasn't enough, but it was what she had. She stood, brushing dust from her riding skirt, and joined Adam at the door. The view beyond showed nothing but pine forest and distant peaks. Peaceful, empty. But somewhere out there, riders were likely searching, motivated by loyalty or greed to return the judge's wayward daughter. "I need to tell you something," Charlotte said, the coffee giving her courage. "About why my father was so angry. It wasn't just about us talking." Adam looked at her, waiting. "My mother died of influenza 6 weeks ago. Before that, she was the bridge between my father and me. She softened his edges, translated his silences. Without her," Charlotte's throat tightened. "He's been different, harder, drinking more. I think he's terrified of losing me too, but he doesn't know how to say it, so it comes out as control. As anger." "That doesn't excuse exiling you," Adam said quietly. "No, but it explains it." Charlotte stared out at the forest. "When you spoke to me that day when you were kind, I think he saw it as the beginning of losing me. First his wife dies, then his daughter starts talking to ranch hands. Next thing he knows, I'll run off with some cowboy and he'll be alone." She laughed bitterly. "The irony is, his fear made it happen. If he'd just let me grieve, let me talk to another human being without treating it like a scandal, you'd still be at the ranch," Adam finished, "and I'd be drifting towards some other job, none the wiser." "Do you think that would have been better?" Adam considered this, his profile serious against the light. "Maybe safer, but better?" He shook his head. "I stopped believing in safe a long time ago. Safe is an illusion people sell themselves to avoid living. Your mother understood that. She came west when it was truly wild, made a life in uncertain country. She didn't choose safe. She chose my father," Charlotte pointed out. "She chose a man who was building something, who had vision and courage enough to create a life from nothing." Adam's voice held something like respect. "From what you've said, she was his partner in that. It's only after losing her that he retreated into rigid control. That's fear talking, not strength." Charlotte found herself nodding. It was exactly what she'd felt but hadn't been able to articulate, that her father had become someone different in his grief, someone her mother wouldn't have recognized. "Time," Adam said abruptly, moving away from the door. "That dust cloud's closer. We need to go." They moved quickly, saddling horses and erasing signs of their presence. Adam kicked dirt over the small fire, scattered the ashes. Charlotte rolled her bedding with practiced efficiency, everything her mother had taught her about frontier pragmatism coming back. Within 10 minutes, they were mounted and moving deeper into the forest, following a game trail that wound upward into rougher country. Behind them, the line shack stood empty again, keeping whatever secrets the walls had witnessed. The afternoon stretched into evening as they climbed higher. The temperature dropped as elevation increased, and Charlotte was grateful for the jacket she'd chosen. They spoke little, conserving energy for the trail, but the silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people focused on the same goal, partners in escape rather than strangers forced together. As the sun touched the western peaks, painting the sky in shades of copper and gold, Adam found a sheltered spot beneath an overhang of rock. "We'll camp here tonight, no fire. Can't risk the smoke being seen, but we're far enough off the main trail that we should be safe." Charlotte dismounted stiffly, every muscle protesting 2 days in the saddle. Adam moved through the camp setup with economical efficiency. Horses picketed and rubbed down, bedrolls spread, supplies inventoried. Charlotte helped where she could, but mostly she watched, learning the rhythms of trail life. "You've done this a lot," she observed as Adam checked the loads in both his rifle and pistol. 7 years of it teaches you efficiency. He set the guns within easy reach. "Every camp is potentially your last if you're careless. Check your weapons, check your animals, check your surroundings. Then maybe you get to relax." They ate cold rations as darkness fell completely, the stars emerging in impossible profusion without city lights to dim them. Charlotte had seen the night sky from the ranch, but never like this. Never so deep, so vast, so overwhelming in its ancient indifference. "My mother used to say the stars were proof that some things are bigger than our small problems," she said softly. "Your mother sounds like she was a wise woman." She was. Charlotte pulled her jacket tighter against the chill. She never complained about leaving Boston, about coming west. She said she'd rather live 1 year fully than 50 safely. My father loved that about her, until she died, and then I think he realized the cost of that philosophy. Adam was quiet for a long moment. Then carefully, he said, "Can I ask you something?" "Yes." "When you walked out of that house last night, were you running from your father or toward something?" Charlotte considered this, surprised by the question's insight. "Both," she said finally. "I was running from exile, from being shipped east and married off to some man who'd see me as a prize or a burden. But I was also running toward," she struggled for words, "toward the person my mother raised me to be, the one who could think and choose and live fully. My father wanted to make me smaller, safer, more controllable. I was running toward being larger than that. And now," Adam's voice was gentle, "now that we're out here, now that you've chosen this, any regrets?" Charlotte looked at him across the small space between their bedrolls. In the starlight, she could barely make out his features, but she heard genuine concern in his question. He wasn't asking if she regretted him. He was asking if she regretted herself, her choice, her rebellion. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "Every sound makes me think it's riders coming to drag us back. I don't know what we're doing or where we're going or how this ends. But regret?" She shook her head firmly. "No. For the first time since Mother died, I feel like I can breathe, like I'm living instead of just existing. So no, Adam Cooper, I don't regret it." She heard rather than saw his smile. "Good, because I'd hate to be the only one out here thinking this might be the best worst decision we've ever made." Charlotte laughed, actually laughed, the sound surprising them both. When had she last laughed? Not since before her mother's death, certainly. The sound felt rusty, unpracticed, but real in a way nothing had felt for weeks. "Get some sleep," Adam said after the laughter faded. "I'll take first watch. I'll wake you around midnight to trade off." "You sure? You didn't sleep at the line shack." "I'm used to it." "You're not." "Sleep while you can, Charlotte. Tomorrow will make Bitter Springs, and that's when things get complicated." Charlotte wanted to argue, to insist she could pull her weight, but exhaustion was already pulling her down. She wrapped herself in her bedroll, using her saddle as a pillow, the way Adam had shown her, and closed her eyes. Sleep came easier than expected, probably due to sheer physical exhaustion, but her dreams were troubled. Her father's angry face, riders pursuing, the endless feeling of fleeing with nowhere safe to land. She woke to Adam's hand gentle on her shoulder. "Your watch," he said quietly. "Any sound that's not normal, wake me immediately. Otherwise, just stay alert and keep the rifle close." Charlotte nodded, sleep-fogged and disoriented. Adam had moved his bedroll closer to the rock face, his gun belt still on, ready for trouble even in sleep. Within minutes, his breathing had deepened and evened. The night was alive with sounds Charlotte had never noticed before. The rustle of small animals, the call of an owl, wind in the pines. Every sound made her heart race until she learned to distinguish threat from normalcy. By the time the stars wheeled toward morning, She'd achieved a kind of hyper-alert calm, understanding now why Adam checked his weapons obsessively. Out here, carelessness meant death. Dawn came with shocking suddenness, the eastern sky blazing pink and gold. Charlotte watched it, thinking about her father waking in the big house to find her gone, his rage and fear when he discovered both his daughter and the ranch hand missing. She wondered if Maria had been questioned, if her father had torn apart her room looking for clues, if he'd already sent riders fanning out across Wyoming territory. Adam stirred as full light hit their camp. He woke instantly, completely, the way soldiers and scouts did. No gradual return to consciousness, just immediate alertness. Anything? Quiet all night, Charlotte reported. Good. Adam stood, rolling his bedroll with practiced efficiency. We'll eat in the saddle. I want to make Bitter Springs by noon, resupply, and be gone before word of us spreads. They were riding within 20 minutes, heading southwest through country that grew increasingly rugged. The trail wound through pine forests and across meadows already browning with the approach of autumn. They saw deer, once a black bear that watched them from a distance, and twice the smoke of distant campfires that might have been trappers or might have been searchers. Adam gave all signs of human presence a wide berth. Around mid-morning, they paused to water the horses at a stream. Charlotte knelt beside Clementine, splashing cold water on her face, when Adam suddenly went still. Riders, he said quietly. Behind us. Maybe a mile back. Charlotte's heart seized. Are they? Can't tell yet. Could be travelers. Could be your father's men. Adam's hand rested on his gun. Mount up. We'll take the ridge trail, harder going, but we'll be able to see if they're following. They climbed quickly, the horses laboring on the steep incline. At the top, Adam dismounted and bellied up to the ridge line, studying their back trail. Charlotte joined him, peering down at the valley below. 3 riders, moving purposefully along the trail they'd just left. Even at this distance, Charlotte could see they were scanning the ground, looking for sign. They're tracking us, she breathed. Maybe. Or tracking someone. Adam's voice was tight. Either way, we can't assume friendly. We'll parallel this ridge for a few miles, then drop back down near Bitter Springs. With luck, they'll lose the trail in the rocky ground. And without luck? Adam didn't answer, which was answer enough. They rode hard along the ridge, terrain forcing them to slow where rock gave way to loose scree. Charlotte's hands ached from gripping the reins, her body protesting the punishing pace. But fear drove them forward, fear and the knowledge that being caught meant the end of everything. By the time they descended toward Bitter Springs, the town visible as a cluster of buildings in a valley below, Charlotte was shaking with exhaustion and tension. Adam called a halt in a stand of aspen just outside town. Listen carefully, he said, his voice all business. We go in separately. You wait here 10 minutes after I leave, then ride in slow, head down, looking for the general store. Buy whatever food you can carry, jerky, hardtack, coffee, beans. Nothing that requires extensive cooking. Pay cash, don't linger, don't talk to anyone more than absolutely necessary. Where will you be? Getting grain for the horses and hearing the local gossip. I'll mention casually that I'm heading north toward Montana. Throw off anyone asking questions. We'll meet at the old oak on the south end of town. You'll see it when you ride through. Big tree, impossible to miss. If I'm not there within 30 minutes of you arriving, ride south without me. Don't wait, don't look for me. Just go. Charlotte's stomach clenched. Adam, if something goes wrong, one of us free is better than both of us caught. His eyes were serious, almost fierce. Promise me, Charlotte. Promise if I'm not there, you ride. I promise, she whispered, the words ash in her mouth. Adam nodded, then did something unexpected. He reached out and squeezed her hand briefly, warmly. We'll be fine. This is just insurance. I'll see you at the oak in an hour. Then he was mounting his buckskin and riding down toward town, leaving Charlotte alone with her fear and her mare, and 10 minutes that felt like hours. She counted the minutes obsessively, watching the sun's progress across the sky. When 10 minutes had elapsed, she nudged Clementine forward, keeping her head down and her hat brim low. Bitter Springs was larger than she'd expected, maybe 200 souls with a main street that boasted a hotel, saloon, general store, and livery. People moved about their business, paying her little attention, Just another traveler passing through, nothing remarkable. The general store was dim after the bright sunlight, smelling of flour and leather and pickle brine. An older woman behind the counter looked up as Charlotte entered. "Help you, miss?" "Traveling supplies," Charlotte said quietly, keeping her voice neutral. "Dried goods? Coffee." The woman nodded, beginning to pull items from shelves. "Going far?" "Just passing through." "Weather's turning. Want to be settled before snow flies." The woman's voice was conversational, but not prying. "That'll be $3.20. Charlotte paid from her dwindling cash, accepted the wrapped parcel, and turned to leave, and walked directly into a man entering the store. "Pardon me, miss," he said, tipping his hat. Then his eyes widened fractionally. "Say, you wouldn't happen to be—" Charlotte didn't wait to hear the rest. She pushed past him and into the street, heart hammering, her purchased supplies clutched to her chest. Behind her, she heard the man call out, "Wait!" She didn't wait. Clementine was tied at the hitching post where she'd left her. Charlotte grabbed the reins, somehow mounted while clutching her parcel, and turned the mare south. People were staring now, confused by her panic. Someone shouted something she didn't catch. The oak. Find the oak. There, massive and ancient, its branches spreading over what looked like a defunct well. Charlotte rode for it like salvation, scanning desperately for Adam's buckskin. Nothing. Empty. He wasn't there. Charlotte's breath came in gasps. Behind her, she heard raised voices from the town. 30 minutes, he'd said. Wait 30 minutes. But how long had it been? Time had become elastic, unmeasurable. She forced herself to count, to breathe. 1 minute, 2. Her hand shook so badly she could barely hold the reins. At minute 5, she heard hoofbeats, but it wasn't Adam. It was 2 riders emerging from town, riding purposefully in her direction. Terror spiked through her veins. Where was Adam? Had he been caught? Was she about to be dragged back to her father's justice? The riders were 100 yards away, 75, 50. And then, miracle. Adam burst from a side street, his buckskin running flat out. He saw Charlotte under the oak, saw the riders bearing down, and made a split-second decision. "Ride right!" he shouted. "South! Now!" Charlotte kicked Clementine into a gallop, the mare responding instantly. Behind her, Adam was shouting something at the riders, his voice carrying authority and anger. She heard gunshots, warning shots, fired into the air, and then Adam was beside her, his horse matching Clementine's pace. "Don't stop!" he yelled over the thunder of hooves. "Not for anything!" They ran. 2 horses, 2 riders, 2 people whose freedom depended on speed and luck. The edge of town blurred past, then they were in open country again, the ground rising toward distant hills. Charlotte risked a glance back. The riders had stopped at the town edge, apparently unwilling to pursue further. But even as relief flooded through her, she saw something that made her blood run cold. More riders, a dozen at least, emerging from another direction, moving purposefully. Hunting. "Adam!" She pointed. He saw them, his jaw tightening. "I know. We've got maybe 30 minutes before they organize properly. There's a canyon ahead, lots of places to hide. We'll go to ground and wait them out." "What happened in town?" "Later," Adam said grimly. "Right now, just ride." So Charlotte rode, her beautiful dream of escape becoming the nightmare of pursuit, her father's long reach extending farther than she'd dared imagine. Behind them, the hunters closed in. Ahead lay uncertain refuge in country neither of them knew. And between, only the desperate hope that freedom was possible for those brave or foolish enough to chase it into the wilderness. The canyon Adam had mentioned turned out to be a maze of red rock and shadow, carved over millennia by water that now ran only as a thin trickle along the bottom. They plunged into it at full gallop, the horses' hooves clattering on stone, echoing off walls that rose 50 feet on either side. Charlotte's heart hammered so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. "There!" Adam pointed to a narrow cleft barely visible in the canyon wall. "Follow me close. Don't let Clementine balk at the tight space." The opening looked impossibly small, but Adam's buckskin squeezed through and Charlotte had no choice but to trust. She urged Clementine forward, feeling the mare's sides scrape against rock on both sides. For a terrifying moment, she thought they'd become stuck, trapped like a cork in a bottle while her father's men closed in. Then they broke through into a hidden pocket, a circular chamber open to the sky above, maybe 30 feet across, with a trickle of water feeding a small pool. "Old hideout," Adam said, already dismounting. "Outlaws used it during the range wars. Most people don't know it exists." He moved quickly to the entrance, listening. The sound of pursuing horses echoed through the canyon, growing louder, then, crucially, passing by their hidden sanctuary without slowing. Charlotte slid from Clementine's back, her legs barely supporting her weight. The adrenaline that had carried her was draining away, leaving her shaking and nauseous. She sank to the ground, wrapping her arms around her knees, trying to control her breathing. Adam waited at the entrance for several long minutes, completely still, tracking the sounds of pursuit as they faded into the distance. Finally, he relaxed fractionally and turned back to Charlotte. "We're clear for now. They'll search the main canyon, maybe some of the obvious side passages. But this place? It's too hidden unless you know exactly where to look." He moved to the horses, beginning to unsaddle them. "We'll stay here until dark, then move again. Can't risk a fire, but we've got water and shelter. We'll survive." "What happened in town?" Charlotte's voice came out shakier than she intended. "Those riders, were they my father's men?" Adam's jaw tightened. "Some of them. The rest were locals who'd seen the bounty poster. Your father didn't waste time, must have sent riders to every town within 50 miles the moment he discovered you gone. The poster calls you a kidnap victim, and me a dangerous drifter with a price of $500 on my head. Dead or alive." He said the last part with bitter humor. "Your father's thorough, I'll give him that." Charlotte felt sick. "I'm so sorry. This is my fault. If I hadn't talked to you that day—" "Stop!" Adam's voice was firm, but not unkind. He crossed to where she sat and lowered himself to the ground beside her. "You didn't create this situation. Your father did, with his pride and his need to control everything around him. You wanted the same thing every human being wants: connection, kindness, the freedom to make your own choices. There's no fault in that. But you're in danger because of me. They could kill you, Adam. They probably will if they catch us." "They could try." Adam's hand rested on the gun at his hip, a gesture so natural he probably didn't realize he was doing it. "I'm not easy to kill, Charlotte. I've survived 7 years on the drift, worked some rough places, dealt with worse than bounty hunters. Your father's men are ranch hands, not gunslingers. They'll make mistakes we won't." Charlotte looked at him, really looked, seeing details she'd missed in the panic of flight. The scar along his jawline, the way his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, even while talking. The economical, precise movements of someone who'd learned to waste neither time nor energy. Adam Cooper wasn't just a drifter. He was something harder, something forged by experiences he hadn't shared. "What were you before you started drifting?" she asked quietly. "What happened 7 years ago that put you on the road?" Adam was silent for so long Charlotte thought he wouldn't answer. Then, staring at the thin stream of water feeding the pool, he began to speak. "I was engaged to be married. Her name was Sarah Milhouse, daughter of a banker in Kansas City. I was 23, working as a clerk in her father's bank, thinking I had my whole life mapped out. Steady job, respectable wife, house with a white fence." His voice was flat, emotionless, but Charlotte heard the old pain underneath. Then the bank got robbed. 3 men, heavily armed, came in during business hours. They shot the guard first just to show they meant business. Then they started clearing out the vault. Charlotte's breath caught. "What did you do?" "The only thing I could." Adam's hand moved unconsciously to his gun again. "I kept a pistol in my desk drawer. Lots of clerks did in those days. When one of the robbers put a gun to Sarah's head and demanded I open the vault faster, I drew and fired. Killed him clean. Then killed his partner when he turned on me." That's incredibly brave. "That's incredibly stupid," Adam corrected. "The third robber fired back. Bullet went through my shoulder and into Sarah, who was standing behind me. She died in my arms while the robber escaped and the bank burned down around us." His voice cracked almost imperceptibly on the word died. "Her father blamed me. Said I should have just given them the money, that his daughter's life was worth more than the bank's assets. The law cleared me, ruled it self-defense, but everyone in Kansas City knew the Millhouses wanted me gone. So I went. Charlotte's hand found his without conscious thought, squeezing gently. It wasn't your fault. You were trying to save her. I know that here. Adam tapped his head. Took me longer to believe it here. He touched his chest. 7 years of drifting, never staying long enough to form attachments, never letting myself care because caring meant risk. Then you came out to that stable crying for your mother, and I remembered what it felt like to want to help someone, even if helping meant risk. Is that why you came with me? Because you saw a chance at redemption? Adam turned to face her, his brown eyes serious. I came with you because you reminded me that some things are worth the risk. That living scared isn't living at all. Sarah wouldn't have wanted me to spend my life running from connection. She was... He paused, searching for words. She was the kind of person who ran toward danger if someone needed help. The kind who believed people should stand up for each other, even when it cost something. When I saw you standing up to your father, refusing to be sent away like an inconvenient package, I thought, Sarah would have liked her. Sarah would have said, help her. Tears burned in Charlotte's eyes. Thank you for telling me, for trusting me with that. Partners should know who they're partnered with, Adam said simply. And make no mistake, Charlotte, we're partners now. Not rescuer and rescued. Not man and woman in the traditional sense. Partners trying to survive long enough to find someplace we can build new lives. Charlotte nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. They sat in companionable silence, listening to the water trickle and the distant sound of wind moving through the canyon. Somewhere above, a hawk cried. Clementine and the buckskin drank from the pool, their presence comforting in its normalcy. After a while, Adam rose and began checking their supplies. Charlotte watched him work, her mind turning over everything he'd revealed. 7 years since Sarah's death, and he still carried a gun and knew how to use it. 7 years of running, and he'd stopped for Charlotte, a woman he barely knew, who represented the kind of risk and attachment he'd been avoiding. Adam, she said quietly, when we get wherever we're going, when we're finally safe, what do you want to do? What kind of life are you hoping for? He looked up from inventorying their food supplies, surprised by the question. I haven't let myself think that far ahead in a long time. Think about it now. Dream a little. What would a good life look like? Adam's expression softened, becoming almost wistful. A small place, maybe. Nothing grand, just a few acres, some horses, work that's mine rather than someone else's. A porch where I could sit in the evenings and watch the sun go down. Maybe, he hesitated, then continued, maybe someone to share it with. Not because it's expected or proper, but because we chose each other, because we're partners in the truest sense. Charlotte's heart beat faster. That sounds like a good life. What about you? Adam set down the supplies and moved back to sit beside her. What's Charlotte Hale's dream when she's not running from her father? Charlotte thought about it, really thought. Not the vague future she'd imagined while trapped in her father's house, but the specific, tangible life she wanted now that freedom was more than an abstract concept. Books, she said finally. A house full of books where I could read whenever I wanted without someone telling me I should be doing something more useful. I'd want to write too. Maybe keep journals, maybe try my hand at stories. My mother loved stories. She smiled at the memory. She'd make them up while we did chores, turning ordinary tasks into adventures. I'd want to do that, to honor her that way. Anything else? Choices. Charlotte's voice grew stronger. I want to make 100 small choices every day. What to wear, what to eat, where to go, who to talk to. I want choices to be so commonplace they become boring. And I want... She paused, surprising herself with the next words. I want to never be alone in the way my father was alone after mother died. I want partnership, friendship, love maybe, if I'm lucky enough to find it. They looked at each other in the dimness of their stone sanctuary. Two people who'd fled everything they knew, who were wanted fugitives with uncertain futures. But in that moment, Charlotte saw something shift in Adam's expression. A recognition, a possibility, an acknowledgement of something growing between them that was more than convenience or circumstance. Charlotte, he began, then stopped as Clementine suddenly raised her head, ears pricked forward, alert. Adam was on his feet instantly, moving silently to the narrow entrance. Charlotte followed, her heart resuming its fearful pounding. Had they been found? Had their sanctuary been discovered? Voices echoed in the canyon outside, growing closer. Male voices, arguing. Telling you, they couldn't have gone far. Horses were already tired when we spotted them. Then where are they? We've searched every damn side canyon for 2 miles. Maybe they kept going, pushed through to the other side. Or maybe they're holed up somewhere we haven't looked yet. That reward's $500, Jim. $500. For that kind of money, I'll search every crack in this rock. Adam's hand was on his gun, his body tense as a coiled spring. Charlotte could barely breathe. The voices were so close, just beyond their hidden entrance, maybe 20 feet away. This is crazy, another voice said. Judge Hale's daughter? Running off with some cowboy? Doesn't make sense. Makes perfect sense if you ask me. The first voice was cynical, knowing. Rich girl, strict father, handsome drifter who pays her attention, oldest story in the world. My bet is she went willingly, and the judge is too proud to admit his daughter chose a nobody over his plans for her. Charlotte felt Adam tense beside her, anger radiating off him like heat. But he remained silent, utterly still. Either way, we bring her back and collect that reward. Dead or alive on the cowboy, remember? Judge said he didn't care which. The voices began to fade, the men moving deeper into the canyon. Adam waited a full 5 minutes after silence returned before releasing his breath in a long, controlled exhale. We can't stay here, Charlotte whispered. If they search this thoroughly again. They won't, Adam's voice was certain. By the time they circle back, we'll be gone. But you're right, we can't stay. We need to put serious distance between us and your father's reach. He moved to the horses, beginning to prepare them for travel. We'll wait until full dark, then move. Head higher into the mountains where tracking is harder. There are mining camps up there, places where people don't ask questions and bounty posters don't reach as quickly. How do you know about mining camps? Adam's smile was grim. 7 years of drifting teaches you where the forgotten places are, where people go when they don't want to be found. They spent the remaining daylight hours dozing fitfully, taking turns keeping watch. Charlotte found herself studying Adam while he slept, the way even in sleep he remained alert, his hand near his weapon. This man who'd killed to protect someone he loved, who'd spent 7 years punishing himself for a tragedy that wasn't his fault, who'd finally chosen to stop running and instead run toward something, toward her. The realization settled in her chest, warm and terrifying. She was falling for Adam Cooper, this quiet, damaged, brave man who'd risked everything to give her a choice. It was too fast, too intense, born of circumstances that were desperate rather than romantic. But it was real nonetheless. When darkness finally came, complete and absolute in the depths of the canyon, they mounted up and moved out. Adam led them through the maze of stone in near total blackness, navigating by memory and feel and some instinct Charlotte couldn't name. Several times she heard movement on the canyon walls above. The men her father had sent, still searching, still hunting, but they remained unseen, unheard, ghosts moving through a landscape of shadows. They climbed for hours, leaving the canyon behind and ascending into true mountain country. The air grew thin and cold, and Charlotte was grateful she'd thought to pack her wool jacket. Around midnight, they paused to rest the horses in a small meadow surrounded by pine. We're above where they'll search tonight, Adam said, allowing himself to relax slightly. By morning, we'll be another 10 miles farther, and the trail will be cold. Charlotte slid from Clementine's back, her legs numb from cold and hours in the saddle. How much longer can we keep this up? Running, hiding, never knowing if the next town will be safe? Adam was quiet, loosening his horse's girth. Honestly, I don't know. Your father's determined, and he's got resources. But the farther we get from Wyoming, the thinner his influence spreads. We get to Colorado, maybe New Mexico. His reach doesn't extend that far. We'll be able to stop running and start living. And if we don't make it that far, then we don't. Adam's voice was matter of fact. Then we get caught, and you get dragged back to your aunt in Philadelphia, and I get hanged for kidnapping. But I don't plan on letting that happen, Charlotte. I've got too much to live for now. The way he said it, the certainty in his voice, made Charlotte's throat tighten with emotion. What changed? She asked. Between Kansas City and now, what made you decide life was worth fighting for again? Adam moved closer, and in the moonlight filtering through the pines, she could see his expression clearly. You did, he said simply. You standing up to your father, choosing exile over submission. You trusting me enough to ride into the wilderness with nothing but hope and stubbornness. You asking me what I dream about, like dreams matter, like the future is something we get to build instead of just survive. He reached out, his hand cupping her face with surprising gentleness. You made me remember what it feels like to care about tomorrow. Charlotte's breath caught. Adam? I know this is complicated, he continued, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. I know we're running for our lives, that everything is uncertain, that I've got no right to feel what I'm feeling, but I'm done lying to myself, Charlotte. I'm done pretending that traveling with you is just about helping someone escape. Somewhere between Willow Creek and here, this stopped being about rescue and started being about love, Charlotte supplied, her voice barely a whisper. Adam's expression was raw, vulnerable. Yeah, love. The kind that scares me because I know how much it can cost, but also the kind that makes me think maybe Sarah was right. Maybe some things are worth any price. Charlotte's hand covered his where it rested against her face. I'm falling for you too, she admitted. I didn't mean to. I wasn't looking for it. But somewhere between being exiled and being free, between running from my father and running toward something better, you became the thing I was running toward. They stood there in the moonlit meadow, two fugitives who'd found something precious in the midst of their desperation. Then Adam leaned in slowly, giving Charlotte every chance to pull away, and kissed her. It was nothing like the kisses Charlotte had imagined when she was a sheltered girl reading romance novels in her father's library. It was cold lips and warm breath, the taste of trail dust and coffee, the scratch of 3 days' beard against her cheek. It was real and immediate and alive in a way fantasies never were. When they parted, both breathing hard, Charlotte said, My father would absolutely kill you if he saw that. Adam laughed, the sound surprised out of him. Your father wants to kill me anyway. Might as well earn it. They made camp in the meadow, building a tiny fire shielded by rocks and fed with dry wood that produced minimal smoke. It was a risk, but the cold was becoming dangerous, and they needed hot food and coffee. Charlotte sat close to Adam as they ate, their shoulders touching, comfortable with a physical closeness that would have been scandalous a week ago. Tell me about your mother, Adam said as they finished eating. What was she like? Charlotte smiled, warming to the topic. Strong. Stubborn as hell, though she'd never have said hell. She had standards. The memory made her laugh. She came from Boston money, had every reason to stay back east where life was comfortable. But she met my father, and he told her about his dream of building something in the West. And she said, I'll come with you. Just like that. Gave up everything to follow a dream that wasn't even hers. Was she happy making that choice? I think so. She never complained, never seemed to regret it. She loved my father fiercely, even when he was being impossible. And she loved the ranch, the work of building something from nothing. Charlotte stared into the fire. The last thing she said to me before the fever took her completely, she said, Don't let your father make you small, Charlotte. Promise me you'll always choose to be large. And you're keeping that promise. I'm trying. Charlotte looked at Adam. She would have liked you, I think. She valued people who worked hard, who kept their word, who weren't afraid to be kind. I wish I could have met her. Me too. Charlotte's voice caught. Everything would be different if she hadn't died. My father wouldn't have become so rigid. I wouldn't have been exiled. We wouldn't be running for our lives right now. No, Adam agreed. But we also wouldn't have found each other. And I'm selfish enough to be grateful for that, even knowing the cost. They talked into the night, sharing stories, learning each other's histories and hopes and fears. Charlotte told him about growing up on the ranch, about the books she'd loved, about her mother teaching her to be strong while her father taught her to be stubborn. Adam talked about his childhood before his parents died, about the foster families who'd taken him in, about learning to rely only on himself because everyone else eventually left. Until now, Charlotte said softly, we won't leave each other. Partners, remember? Partners, Adam agreed, sealing it with another kiss. They took turns keeping watch through the night, and when dawn came with brutal cold and the promise of harder terrain ahead, they mounted up and rode deeper into the mountains. Behind them, somewhere in the valleys below, Judge Edmund Hale's men continued their search. But with each mile gained, Charlotte felt the weight of her father's control lessening, felt herself becoming someone new, someone chosen rather than assigned. 3 days later, they reached a mining camp called Silver Ridge, a ramshackle collection of tents and crude cabins clinging to a mountainside where men tore silver from the earth and drank away their earnings. It was rough, lawless, and perfect for two people trying to disappear. Adam secured them a room in a boarding house run by a weathered woman who asked no questions and clearly didn't care about bounty posters from Wyoming territory. The room was tiny, barely large enough for a narrow bed and a chair, with walls so thin they could hear every sound from the other rooms. "It's not much," Adam said apologetically. "It's perfect," Charlotte assured him. "It has walls and a roof and no one trying to drag us back to my father. That makes it paradise." They lived in Silver Ridge for 2 weeks, Adam picking up work in the mine while Charlotte helped the boarding house owner with cooking and laundry. It was hard, honest work that left them both exhausted by evening, but there was freedom in it, the freedom of being anonymous, of building something together, of making choices about their own lives. But paradise, Charlotte learned, was always temporary. She was coming back from the general store one afternoon when she saw him, a rider pausing at the edge of town, showing something to the saloon keeper. Even from a distance, Charlotte recognized the piece of paper, a bounty poster. Her blood turned to ice. She ducked into an alley, watching as the rider moved through town, showing the poster to anyone who'd look. Most people shook their heads, disinterested, but a few looked thoughtful, studied the paper more carefully. It was only a matter of time before someone made the connection. Charlotte ran for the boarding house, taking the stairs 2 at a time. Adam was in their room, washing up after his shift in the mine, and he took one look at her face and reached for his gun. "They're here," Charlotte gasped. "A rider with posters. We have to go. Now." Adam didn't waste time with questions. Within 5 minutes, they'd gathered their few possessions, settled accounts with the landlady, and were headed for the livery where their horses were stabled. The street outside felt like a gauntlet, every face a potential threat, every shadow hiding an informant motivated by $500. They were saddling the horses when they heard it. Raised voices from the street, the sound of men organizing, the unmistakable energy of a hunt beginning. "Someone recognized us," Adam said grimly, working faster. "We've got maybe 10 minutes before they come looking." "Where do we go? The whole town knows now." "Higher." Adam swung into his saddle. "There's another camp, Devil's Fork, about 20 miles northwest. Harder to reach, more desperate men, less interested in law. We'll be safer there." They rode out the back of the livery just as shouting erupted from the boarding house. Charlotte heard her name being called, heard men arguing about the reward, heard the organized chaos of pursuit beginning. And then they were running again, climbing higher into mountains that had begun to dust themselves with early snow, fleeing toward an uncertain sanctuary, gambling everything on Adam's knowledge of the forgotten places where people went to be lost. The sun was setting, painting the peaks in shades of blood and gold, as they climbed toward Devil's Fork. Behind them, Silver Ridge buzzed with the news of Judge Hale's runaway daughter and her kidnapper. Ahead lay only the cold promise of mountains and the desperate hope that somewhere, somehow, they'd find a place where they could finally stop running. Charlotte looked at Adam, his profile stern and beautiful against the dying light, and thought, whatever comes, at least we chose this together. It was all the certainty she had, and somehow it was enough. Devil's Fork turned out to be less a town and more a collection of desperate men clinging to a mountainside like lichen on rock. They arrived after midnight, the horses stumbling with exhaustion, frost already forming on their manes. The few buildings that existed were dark except for a saloon that glowed with lamplight and echoed with rough laughter. Adam dismounted, swaying slightly. They'd been riding for nearly 8 hours straight, climbing trails that were barely more than animal paths, pushing through cold that turned their breath to ice crystals. Charlotte's hands were so numb she couldn't feel the reins anymore. "Wait here," Adam said, his voice hoarse from cold and thirst. "Let me see if there's anywhere we can shelter." He disappeared into the saloon, leaving Charlotte alone with the horses in darkness so complete she couldn't see her own hands. She pressed close to Clementine, stealing warmth from the mare's body, listening to sounds drifting from inside. Men's voices, the clink of bottles, someone playing a badly tuned piano. When Adam emerged 15 minutes later, he wasn't alone. A woman followed him, wrapped in a fur coat that had seen better days, her face weathered but still handsome in the lamplight spilling from the door. "This is Delilah," Adam said. "She runs the boarding operation such as it is. Delilah, this is my wife, Charlotte." Charlotte's heart skipped at the word wife, but she had enough presence of mind to play along. "Pleased to meet you, ma'am." Delilah looked them over with shrewd eyes that had clearly seen everything twice. "Your man says you're heading for California, got caught in early weather. That about right?" "Yes, ma'am," Charlotte said, letting exhaustion make her voice smaller, younger. "We didn't expect the cold to come so soon." "Never does, never does." Delilah jerked her head toward a cabin barely visible in the darkness. "I've got one room free. Stove works, bed's clean enough. $2 a night, meals extra. You pay in advance, you don't ask questions about other guests, and you keep to yourselves. Those are the rules." Adam counted out bills with stiff fingers. "We'll need somewhere for the horses, too. Lean-to out back, not fancy, but it keeps the wind off." Delilah pocketed the money. "You two look dead on your feet. Get some sleep. Nobody here cares who you are or where you're from, and that's how we like it." The room was exactly as advertised, small, cold despite the stove, furnished with a bed that sagged in the middle and a chair with one short leg. But after weeks of running, after sleeping on hard ground and keeping one eye open for pursuers, it felt like a palace. Charlotte sank onto the bed while Adam tended the stove, coaxing heat from damp wood. When he finally sat beside her, she could see the toll their flight had taken. Deep shadows under his eyes, new lines bracketing his mouth, his hands trembling slightly from exhaustion and cold. "You called me your wife," she said quietly. Adam looked at her, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "Safer that way. A man traveling alone with a woman who's not his wife raises questions. A married couple heading west is unremarkable." He paused. "I'm sorry. I should have asked first. Don't apologize." Charlotte's hand found his. "You're right. It's safer. It caught me by surprise hearing it out loud." "Did it bother you?" Charlotte considered this honestly. A week ago, the idea would have been scandalous, impossible. But a week ago, she'd still been Judge Hale's daughter, still bound by propriety and expectation. Now she was someone different, someone who'd chosen exile over submission, who'd ridden through mountain passes in the dark, who'd fallen in love with a man her father would call beneath her. "No," she said finally. "It didn't bother me. It felt right somehow, like something true, even though it's technically a lie." Adam's hand tightened on hers. "Charlotte." Whatever he'd been about to say was interrupted by shouting from outside, followed by gunshots. They both froze, Adam's free hand going immediately to his weapon. More shouting, then laughter. The sounds of men drunk and restless with nothing to do but cause trouble. "Welcome to Devil's Fork," Adam said grimly. "This place, it's the end of the line for people running from something. Law doesn't reach this high, and the men here like it that way." He stood, checking the door's flimsy lock. "We'll stay a few days, rest the horses, figure out our next move. But we can't settle here, Charlotte. This isn't a place for building a life, it's a place for hiding until you can find somewhere better. Do you think my father's men will find us here? Eventually, maybe, but it'll take time. Devil's Fork isn't on most maps, and the people here won't cooperate with outsiders asking questions." Adam returned to the bed, pulling off his boots with visible effort. "We're safe enough for now. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we'll figure out what comes next." Charlotte lay down fully clothed, too tired to undress, too cold to consider it anyway. Adam stretched out beside her, the bed so narrow they had no choice but to press close. It should have felt awkward, inappropriate, scandalous. Instead, it felt necessary. Two people sharing warmth and safety in a world determined to separate them. She was asleep within minutes, dreamless and deep. Morning came late at this altitude, the sun struggling to clear the surrounding peaks. Charlotte woke to find Adam already up, standing at the single small window, watching the town come sluggishly to life. "How long have you been awake?" she asked, sitting up and immediately regretting it as cold air hit her. A while. Adam didn't turn from the window. Been watching the patterns, who's moving where, who's paying attention to newcomers, who might be trouble. And most people here are too wrapped up in their own problems to care about ours. But there's a man, big fellow with a scar across his nose, who's been asking Delilah questions about the new couple who came in late last night. Adam's jaw tightened. Could be nothing. Could be he's just curious. Or could be he's seen those bounty posters and is trying to decide if we're worth the trouble of collecting on. Charlotte joined him at the window, peering out at Devil's Fork in daylight. It was even more depressing than nighttime had suggested. Maybe 20 buildings total, most in various states of decay with muddy paths connecting them. Men moved between the saloon and the mine entrance looking hungry and hard used. This was where hope came to die. We can't stay here long, she said. No. Adam turned to face her. But I'm not sure where else to go. Your father's got riders searching every town between here and California. The bounty's too high to ignore, and the story's too good. Rich man's daughter stolen by a drifter. People want to believe it, want to be the hero who rescues the kidnapped girl. What if... Charlotte stopped, the idea forming even as she spoke. What if we made ourselves unremarkable? What if instead of hiding in places like this, we hid in plain sight? What do you mean? Charlotte moved to where their saddlebags lay. From hers, she pulled the small leather pouch Maria had given her, her mother's jewelry. We've been running as fugitives, looking like people with something to hide. What if we stopped looking like that? What if we became actually married? Not pretend married like last night, but legally married. A woman can't be kidnapped by her own husband, and a man can't be charged with abduction if his wife says she went willingly. Adam stared at her. Charlotte, you can't be serious. Why not? The more she thought about it, the more sense it made. My father's influence only extends so far. We get married in a town where he has no reach, somewhere in Colorado maybe, and suddenly his whole case falls apart. I'm no longer a victim to be rescued. I'm a married woman who made a choice. Your father would never accept it. He'd find a way to invalidate it, call it coercion. Let him try. Charlotte's voice grew stronger. But legally, Adam, he'd have no standing. A father can't force his married daughter to return to his household. The law recognizes a husband's rights over a father's. Adam ran a hand through his hair, clearly struggling with the idea. You're talking about marrying me, really marrying me, as a legal strategy. That's not... Charlotte, that's not how marriage should happen. How should it happen? Charlotte challenged. With my father's permission. With a proper courtship in proper society? Adam, those options died the moment we rode out of Willow Creek. This is the world we're in now. This is what survival looks like. But marriage, that's permanent. That's... Adam's voice dropped. That's not something you do just to escape a bounty hunter. Charlotte moved closer, taking his hands in hers. You're right, it's not. But I'm not proposing this just as a legal strategy, Adam. I'm proposing it because somewhere between Wyoming and here, between running and hiding and surviving together, she took a breath. I fell in love with you, completely, terrifyingly. In a way that makes me certain I want to build a life with you, not just survive the next few weeks. Adam's expression was raw with emotion. You can't know that. We've been together less than a month, most of it spent running for our lives. And in that month, I've learned more about you than I knew about anyone back in Willow Creek, Charlotte interrupted. I know you check your weapons every night before sleeping. I know you give the horses water before you drink yourself. I know you have nightmares about Sarah, but you never wake me because you don't want me to worry. I know you're the kind of man who risks his life for someone else's freedom, who keeps his promises even when they cost him everything. Charlotte, I know this isn't how it's supposed to happen, she continued. I know we should have more time, more certainty, more normal circumstances. But we don't have those things, Adam. We have right now. We have each other. And we have a choice. Keep running as fugitives or make ourselves legitimate. Legally, emotionally, permanently. Adam was silent for a long moment, his hands tight on hers. Then quietly, he said, You deserve better than this. Better than a rushed marriage in a mining camp to a drifter with nothing to his name but a horse and a gun. I deserve to choose, Charlotte corrected. And I choose you. The question is, do you choose me? Not as a responsibility or an obligation, but as a partner, as someone you want to build a life with. Adam pulled her close, his face buried in her hair, his voice muffled against her. I chose you the moment I saddled my horse that first night. Every day since, I've been choosing you. But I need you to be sure, Charlotte. Because once we do this, there's no going back. You'll be married to a man your father despises, cutting off any chance of reconciliation. There was never going to be reconciliation, Charlotte said firmly. My father made that clear when he exiled me. The only question is whether I spend the rest of my life running from his judgment or build something so strong it doesn't matter what he thinks. Adam pulled back to look at her, his eyes searching hers. Whatever he saw there seemed to satisfy him, because he nodded slowly. All right. Yes. If you're sure. Yes, I want to marry you. Not as a strategy, not as survival, but because I love you, Charlotte Hale. Because you're brave and stubborn, and you make me want to be better than I've been. Charlotte felt tears sting her eyes, happy tears this time, not the desperate tears of the past weeks. When? Where? There's a town called Leadville, about 3 days' ride from here. Growing fast with the silver boom, lots of people coming and going. We can find a preacher there, get properly married, maybe even find work and settle for a while. Adam's expression grew thoughtful. It's far enough from Wyoming that your father's immediate influence won't reach, but legitimate enough that the marriage will be legally recognized. 3 days, Charlotte said, testing the idea. 3 days, and we'll be married. If we make it that far. Adam's pragmatic side reasserted itself. We still need to get past Scarface downstairs and whoever else might be looking for us. And we need supplies. We can't show up in Leadville looking like outlaws. They spent the morning planning, Adam venturing out to gather information while Charlotte stayed in the room, keeping out of sight. He returned around midday with bread, cheese, and news. Scarface is definitely suspicious, Adam reported, tearing the bread into chunks. But he's not sure enough to act. Delilah told him we're the Coopers, heading for California to stake a mining claim. She's protective of her guests, doesn't like outsiders making trouble. How long do we have? A day, maybe 2 before word spreads and someone makes the connection. Adam handed her food. We leave tomorrow at dawn. I bought supplies in town, paid extra to have them delivered after dark so no one sees how much we're carrying. With luck, we'll be gone before anyone realizes we were more than just another couple passing through. They spent the afternoon in their room, voices low, planning their route to Leadville. Adam sketched maps from memory on the back of a wanted poster someone had left in their room. Cruel irony, Charlotte thought, planning their escape on paper that called for their capture. That evening, after dark, Adam collected their supplies from Delilah. Charlotte watched from the window as he made multiple trips, loading their saddlebags methodically. Flour, beans, coffee, dried meat, ammunition. The supplies of people planning to travel hard and fast. When he returned for the last load, Delilah followed him partway, her voice carrying in the cold air. Whatever trouble you're running from, Cooper, you'd best stay ahead of it. That man with the scar, he sent someone down the mountain this afternoon. Messenger, looked like. Could be nothing, but... I understand, Adam said quietly. Thank you for the warning. Didn't do it for you. Delilah's voice was matter of fact. Did it because that girl up there deserves a chance. Seen too many young women destroyed by men who think they own them. If she chose you, then you'd best be worthy of it. Charlotte heard Adam's voice, thick with emotion. I'm trying to be. Try harder. Then Delilah was gone, her footsteps crunching in the frost. Adam came back to the room, his face set. We leave tonight. Now. Scarface sent word somewhere, and I don't want to wait around to see who shows up to collect it. Charlotte was already moving, gathering their few possessions. The horses, I'll get them ready. You stay here, stay quiet, 5 minutes. He was gone before Charlotte could respond. She used the time to change into her warmest clothes, braid her hair tightly, prepare herself for another night ride through mountain cold. Her hands shook as she worked, but not from fear. From anticipation, from the knowledge that they were so close to a solution, if they could just stay ahead of pursuit for 3 more days. Adam returned, leading both horses, their breath steaming in the frigid air. Delilah's covering for us. She'll tell anyone who asks that we're still asleep. Might buy us a few hours. They mounted in darkness, walking the horses quietly through Devil's Fork's muddy streets. A few men stumbled out of the saloon, too drunk to notice or care about two riders departing. The town fell away behind them, and then they were climbing again, following a trail barely visible in starlight. Behind them, Devil's Fork settled into its nightly routine of drinking and fighting and forgetting. Ahead lay 3 days of hard riding, of staying ahead of men who wanted to collect a reward, of reaching Leadville before their luck ran out. Charlotte looked back once, seeing the small cluster of lights disappearing around a bend. Then she faced forward toward Adam's back, toward the uncertain future they were riding into together. 3 days. Just 3 more days, and they could stop running. 3 days, and they could build something permanent, something Judge Edmund Hale's anger couldn't destroy. It seemed simultaneously like no time at all and an impossible distance. The first day passed in a blur of cold and concentration. They followed trails that were barely more than suggestions, climbing higher into country where snow had already fallen and lay in drifts beneath the pines. Several times they heard riders behind them, the sound carrying strangely in the thin air, but they couldn't tell if it was pursuit or just other travelers on the mountain roads. They stopped only briefly to rest the horses, eating in the saddle, speaking in whispers when they spoke at all. Every muscle in Charlotte's body ached, and her face was burned raw from wind and sun reflecting off snow. But she didn't complain. Complaining was a luxury they couldn't afford. As dusk fell on the first day, Adam found them shelter in a cave, not deep, but enough to block the wind and hide their small fire. They huddled together for warmth, sharing a single blanket, too tired even for conversation. "Tomorrow's the hardest stretch," Adam said finally, his voice rough. "There's a pass. Narrow, dangerous, but it cuts 10 miles off the route to Leadville. Problem is, if your father's men know the country, they might guess we'll use it. Could be riding into an ambush. Is there another way?" "Yes, but it adds 2 days we don't have, and the longer route goes through mining camps where our faces might be recognized." Adam's arm tightened around her. "The pass is our best chance." Charlotte nodded against his shoulder. "Then we take it." "You're sure?" "I'm sure I trust your judgment. I'm sure I want to get to Leadville and marry you before something else goes wrong." She tilted her head to look up at him. "And I'm sure that whatever happens tomorrow, we face it together." Adam kissed her then, hard and desperate, a kiss that tasted of fear and determination and love all tangled together. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Charlotte saw something fierce in his expression. "Tomorrow," he said. "We make it through tomorrow, and we're almost there." "Tomorrow," Charlotte echoed, sealing it like a promise. They took turns keeping watch through the night, and when dawn broke cold and clear, they were already mounted and moving toward the pass Adam had described. The trail grew steeper, more treacherous, climbing toward a saddle between two peaks that looked impossibly high and impossibly narrow. Around mid-morning, as they approached the entrance to the pass, Adam suddenly pulled up short, his hand raised for silence. Charlotte stopped Clementine, her heart hammering, listening. Voices. Men's voices, echoing off stone. Adam dismounted silently, moving to the edge of a drop-off, peering down at the trail below. When he returned, his face was grim. 4 riders, he said quietly, waiting at the narrow point. Could be coincidence, could be they're waiting for us specifically. Either way, we can't go through there. The long route? Charlotte asked, though she already knew the answer. Too late. If they're positioned here, they'll have men watching that approach too. Adam's jaw tightened. We're going to have to go over instead of through. Charlotte looked up at the steep slopes rising on either side of the pass. Can the horses make it? If we're lucky and careful. Adam's voice didn't inspire confidence. It's loose rock and ice, and one wrong step could send us tumbling. But staying here guarantees capture. At least this way we've got a chance. They began the climb, leading the horses on foot, each step carefully chosen. The altitude made breathing difficult, and the cold bit through every layer of clothing. Charlotte's hands bled from gripping sharp rocks. Her legs trembled with exhaustion, but she kept climbing, kept following Adam's steady progress upward. Below, they heard shouts. The waiting men had spotted them. Gunshots rang out, but they were too far away, the angle too steep. The bullets whined off rock harmlessly, but they added urgency to the climb. Almost there, Adam called back, his voice thin in the thin air. Just a little farther, Clementine's hoof slipped on ice. The mare scrambled, found purchase, then slipped again. Charlotte grabbed the reins, trying to help, but the weight was too much. The mare went down on her knees, sliding backward, eyes rolling white with panic. "Let her go!" Adam shouted. "Charlotte, let go or she'll pull you down." Charlotte released the reins, watching helplessly as Clementine slid 10 feet, 20, then somehow found footing and stopped, trembling but intact. The supplies tied to her saddle, however, including Charlotte's mother's jewelry, came loose, tumbling down the slope to disappear among the rocks below. There was no time to mourn the loss. They kept climbing, finally cresting the ridge just as more gunshots echoed from below. Adam pulled Charlotte over the top, both of them collapsing in the snow, gasping for air. "We made it," Charlotte managed between breaths. "We actually made it." Adam was already up, scanning their surroundings. "We're not safe yet. Those men will find a way around, and we've lost half our supplies. We need to move, need to make Leadville before they can organize another search." They descended the far side of the ridge more carefully, Adam leading Clementine while Charlotte rode his buckskin. The mare was shaken but sound, and by afternoon they'd made it back to lower elevation where breathing was easier and trees offered some cover. That night they made a cold camp, huddled together for warmth, their remaining supplies rationed carefully. Charlotte thought about her mother's jewelry, somewhere in the rocks behind them, lost forever. It felt symbolic somehow, the last connection to her old life, to Judge Hale's daughter, gone. What remained was just Charlotte, just herself, building a new life from nothing but determination and love. "One more day," Adam said into the darkness. "Tomorrow evening we'll reach Leadville. We can do this, Charlotte. We're going to make it." Charlotte wanted to believe him, but the night felt very dark and very cold, and somewhere behind them, her father's men were still searching, still determined to drag her back to the life she'd fled. She fell asleep with Adam's arms around her, their future balanced on the edge of a knife, uncertain and terrifying, and theirs. The last day dawned clear and bitterly cold. They rode hard, pushing the exhausted horses, driven by the knowledge that Leadville represented not just shelter, but salvation. Every mile gained was a mile closer to becoming legitimate, to transforming from fugitives into a married couple simply trying to make their way west. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, they crested a final ridge and saw it. Leadville spread below them, a boom town exploding with growth, its lights already twinkling in the gathering dusk. Smoke rose from hundreds of chimneys. They could hear the distant sound of music, of life, continuing oblivious to their desperate journey. "We made it," Charlotte whispered, hardly daring to believe it. Adam's hand found hers. "We made it. Tomorrow morning we find a preacher. By tomorrow afternoon you'll be Charlotte Cooper, and your father's reach ends there." They rode into Leadville as the last light faded from the sky. Two riders on exhausted horses, their clothes travel-stained, their faces marked by weeks of running. But they rode together, partners in survival, and tomorrow they would make it permanent. Tomorrow they would choose each other, legally and irrevocably, building something stronger than fear, stronger than exile, stronger than Judge Edmund Hale's fury. Tomorrow they would win. Leadville's main street was chaos incarnate. Miners stumbling between saloons, wagons loaded with ore rumbling past, women in bright dresses calling from second-story windows, the cacophony of a town growing faster than its ability to contain itself. Charlotte and Adam found a boarding house on the quieter edge of town, run by a stern-faced widow named Mrs. Hartwell, who looked them over with sharp eyes before accepting their money. "You'll want the room at the end," she said, handing Adam a key. "Quieter, less traffic from the other guests." Her gaze lingered on Charlotte's wind-burned face, her travel-stained clothes. "There's a bathhouse 2 streets over. Hot water costs extra, but you look like you could use it." Charlotte wanted to kiss the woman. "Thank you. Breakfast is at 7, supper at 6. You miss it, you go hungry." Mrs. Hartwell turned to go, then paused. "The preacher, Reverend Morrison, he's got a small church on Oak Street. Performs marriages most mornings if you get there early enough. Doesn't ask too many questions." Charlotte felt heat rise in her cheeks. "How did you—" "Been running a boarding house for 15 years, girl. I know the look of people running towards something instead of away from it." Mrs. Hartwell's expression softened fractionally. "Get some rest. Whatever you're running from can wait until tomorrow." Their room was small but clean, with a real bed, not a bedroll on hard ground, and a window that looked out toward the mountains they'd just crossed. Adam set their remaining supplies in the corner, then stood awkwardly, as if suddenly realizing the intimacy of sharing a room now that they weren't actively fleeing for their lives. "I can sleep on the floor," he offered. "Give you the bed." Charlotte was too exhausted for propriety. "Adam, we've been sleeping pressed together for warmth for 2 weeks. I think we can share a bed without scandal." She sat heavily, pulling off her boots with a groan. "Besides, tomorrow we'll be married. Might as well get used to it." Adam smiled, the first real smile she'd seen in days. "Charlotte Cooper has a nice sound to it." "It does, doesn't it?" Charlotte lay back on the bed, feeling her muscles slowly unlock. "My father would hate it." "Your father hates me already. At least this way, his hatred accomplishes nothing." Adam sat beside her, his hand finding hers. "Are you sure about this? Really sure? Because once we do it, Charlotte, there's no undoing it. You'll be tied to a man with no money, no prospects, nothing but his horse and his name." Charlotte turned to look at him, this man who'd risked everything to give her a choice, who'd ridden through wilderness and danger without complaint, who looked at her like she was something precious rather than something to be controlled. "I'm sure," she said firmly. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." They fell asleep still clothed, too tired for anything but unconsciousness. And when Charlotte woke to morning light streaming through the window, Adam was already gone. Panic seized her for a moment. Had he left? Had he changed his mind? Until she saw the note propped on the chair. "Gone to find the preacher and make arrangements. Back within the hour. Trust me." Ah, Charlotte did trust him. It was perhaps the most remarkable thing about their entire impossible situation. This absolute trust between two people who barely knew each other by conventional measures but knew everything that mattered. She used his absence to wash as best she could with the basin and pitcher in the room, to braid her hair properly, to change into her cleanest clothes, the simple blue dress she'd packed that first desperate night. It wasn't what she'd imagined wearing to her wedding. There would be no white lace, no church full of family, no reception with champagne and cake. Just her and Adam and a preacher in a boomtown church, making promises that would reshape their entire lives. It was perfect. Adam returned exactly when he'd promised, looking nervous and determined in equal measure. "Reverend Morrison can see us at 11. He asks for a donation to the church but doesn't require legal documentation. Said he's married plenty of couples heading west who didn't have papers." 11. Charlotte checked the small watch pinned to her dress, a gift from her mother years ago, one of the few possessions she still had. "That's 2 hours from now." "We could wait," Adam said quickly. "If you need more time to think." "I don't need more time," Charlotte stood, smoothing her dress. "But I do need witnesses." "Don't we need witnesses?" "The Reverend and his wife will serve. It's legal that way." Adam moved closer, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Charlotte, I need to tell you something before we do this. About money." Charlotte's stomach tightened. "What about it?" "I've got about $40 left. That's it. That's everything I own in the world, besides my horse and gear. It's enough to keep us housed and fed for maybe 2 weeks if we're careful. After that," he took a breath. "After that, I need to find work. And you need to understand what that means. Mining work if I can get it, ranch work if I can't, anything that pays. It won't be easy. We won't have much. You'll be the wife of a working man, Charlotte, doing laundry and cooking and all the things you probably never had to do at your father's house." "Do you think I don't know that?" Charlotte's voice was gentle but firm. "Adam, I chose this. I chose you. Not your money, which you don't have, and not your status, which you definitely don't have. I chose the man who followed me into the wilderness, who kept me safe, who treated me like a partner instead of a possession. Everything else, we'll figure out together." Relief flooded Adam's face. Together. I like the sound of that. They spent the next 2 hours in a strange limbo, too nervous to eat the breakfast Mrs. Hartwell had laid out, too keyed up to rest, too aware of the magnitude of what they were about to do to make casual conversation. Instead, they sat together in their room, hands clasped, occasionally speaking of small things, the weather, the noise of the town, anything but the enormous step they were about to take. At 11:15, they walked to Oak Street. The church was small, barely more than a wooden box with a cross mounted above the door, but it was clean and well kept. Reverend Morrison met them at the entrance, a man of maybe 50 with kind eyes and the weathered look of someone who'd lived hard before finding faith. "You must be the Coopers," he said, shaking Adam's hand. "Or rather, soon to be. Come in, come in. My wife is preparing the registry." Inside, the church was simple. Rough-hewn pews, a small altar, windows that let in morning light. Mrs. Morrison appeared from a back room, a plump woman with a warm smile, carrying a leather-bound book. "Such a lovely couple," she said, beaming at them. "How long have you known each other?" Charlotte and Adam exchanged glances. "Not long by conventional measures," Adam said carefully, "but long enough to know we want to build a life together." "That's all that matters," Reverend Morrison said, opening his Bible. "Love doesn't run on a schedule. Sometimes you just know." He gestured them to stand before the altar. "Shall we begin?" Charlotte's heart was racing so fast she thought she might faint. This was it. This was the moment everything changed, irrevocably, permanently. She felt Adam's hand find hers, his grip steady and sure, and drew strength from it. The Reverend began to speak, his voice filling the small church with words about commitment and partnership, about choosing to face life together rather than alone. Charlotte heard it all through a strange filter, as if she were both present and watching from a distance. This was her wedding. She was getting married to Adam Cooper, a man she'd known less than a month, a man she loved more than she'd known it was possible to love. "Do you, Adam Joseph Cooper, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? To have and to hold in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, as long as you both shall live?" Adam's voice was clear and strong. "I do." "And do you, Charlotte Rose Hale, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, as long as you both shall live?" Charlotte looked at Adam, at the man who'd given up everything to follow her, who'd kept every promise, who'd chosen her every single day when he could have ridden away. She thought of her father, of the life she'd fled, of the choice she was making right now that would echo through the rest of her days. "I do," she said, her voice ringing with certainty. "By the power vested in me by the territory of Colorado and the grace of God, I now pronounce you husband and wife." Reverend Morrison smiled broadly. "Son, you may kiss your bride." Adam cupped Charlotte's face in his hands, his touch gentle despite the calluses from years of hard work, and kissed her. It was sweet and chaste and perfect, witnessed by two strangers in a tiny church in a boomtown, and Charlotte felt tears slip down her cheeks, happy tears, relieved tears, tears of joy and fear and overwhelming love all tangled together. When they broke apart, Mrs. Morrison was crying too, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. "Beautiful," she sniffed. "Just beautiful. Now, let's get this made official." They signed the registry, Charlotte's hand shaking slightly as she wrote Charlotte Cooper for the first time. Adam's signature was steady, bold. The Morrisons signed as witnesses, making it legal, making it real. "That'll be $5 for the church fund," Reverend Morrison said gently. "If you can spare it." Adam paid without hesitation, though Charlotte knew it represented a significant portion of their remaining money. Some things were worth the cost. They emerged from the church into bright November sunshine, officially married, legally protected, no longer fugitives, but a legitimate couple heading west to start a new life. Charlotte felt lightheaded with the magnitude of it. "Well, Mrs. Cooper," Adam said, tucking her hand into the crook of his arm, "what would you like to do first as a married woman?" Charlotte laughed, the sound surprising them both with its pure joy. "I'd like to eat. I'm starving. I was too nervous this morning to even think about food." They found a restaurant on Main Street. Nothing fancy, but it had real tables and chairs and the smell of fresh bread wafting from the kitchen. Adam ordered steaks and potatoes, spending money they couldn't afford, but Charlotte didn't protest. This was their wedding meal, such as it was, and they deserved this one small celebration. Over food, they began to plan practically. Adam would look for work tomorrow. Several mines were hiring, and his strong back and willingness to work hard would count in his favor. Charlotte would see about taking in laundry or mending, work she could do from their boarding house room that would bring in extra income. "It won't be glamorous," Adam warned, cutting his steak. "Mining is brutal work, long hours, dangerous conditions, and the pay, it's enough to survive on, but barely. I don't need glamorous, Charlotte said. I just need honest. I need us to be building something that's ours, not living on borrowed time. They were finishing their meal when Charlotte saw him, a man entering the restaurant, travel-stained and exhausted-looking, with the purposeful bearing of someone on a mission. He moved to the bar, pulling something from his coat, a piece of paper, a poster. Charlotte's blood ran cold. She grabbed Adam's hand across the table. Adam, don't look obvious, but that man at the bar, he's showing the bartender something. I think it's a bounty poster. Adam had already seen it, his expression carefully neutral. Stay calm. We're married now, remember? Legally, you're my wife. He's got no claim. But Charlotte's heart was hammering as she watched the bartender shake his head, pointing out the window toward the street. The man followed the bartender's gesture, scanning the restaurant, and his eyes landed directly on Charlotte. Recognition flared in his face. He started toward their table, hand moving to his hip where Charlotte could see a gun. Adam stood smoothly, positioning himself between Charlotte and the approaching man. Can I help you? That woman, the man said, his voice loud enough to draw attention from other diners. That's Charlotte Hale. Judge Edmund Hale's daughter. There's a reward out for her return. You're mistaken, Adam said calmly. This is my wife, Charlotte Cooper. We were just married this morning at Reverend Morrison's church. You can check the registry if you doubt me. The man's eyes narrowed. You're the one they call a kidnapper, Adam Cooper, $500, dead or alive. The restaurant had gone quiet, all eyes on the confrontation. Charlotte could feel panic rising but forced it down. They'd prepared for this. They had the law on their side now. I kidnapped no one, Adam said, his voice carrying to every corner of the restaurant. Miss Hale, now Mrs. Cooper, chose to leave her father's house of her own free will. She chose to travel with me, and she chose to marry me. All legal, all documented. Her father's authority ended the moment she became my wife. Judge Hale says different. Says you stole his daughter. Judge Hale, Charlotte interrupted, standing and moving to Adam's side, is my father. And he's wrong. I left willingly because he tried to force me into a life I didn't want. I chose Adam. I chose freedom. And now I've chosen to marry him, which makes me legally his wife, not my father's property. The bounty hunter looked uncertain now, his easy capture becoming complicated. The law recognizes marriage, a new voice said. Charlotte turned to see Reverend Morrison entering the restaurant, his wife behind him. The preacher moved to stand beside Charlotte and Adam. I married these two myself this morning, legal and binding. The lady speaks true. She's Mrs. Cooper now, not Miss Hale. Her husband has full legal rights, and her father's jurisdiction ends at his property line. The bounty hunter looked between them all, clearly trying to calculate whether $500 was worth the legal complication. Judge Hale ain't gonna like this. I suspect you're right, Adam said evenly, but Judge Hale's likes and dislikes don't change the law. You're welcome to check our marriage certificate. Reverend Morrison has it registered proper. After that, unless you've got some other claim, I'd appreciate you leaving my wife and me to finish our meal in peace. The man stood there for a long moment, jaw working. Finally, he spat on the floor, a gesture of contempt and frustration, and turned to leave. Judge ain't gonna like this one bit, he repeated, then stalked out. Charlotte's legs gave out and she sank back into her chair, shaking with reaction. Adam sat beside her, his arm going around her shoulders, while the restaurant slowly returned to its normal noise level. That was terrifying, Charlotte managed. But it worked. Adam's voice held wonder and relief. It actually worked. The marriage, it protected us. The law is on our side now. Reverend Morrison pulled up a chair. That man will likely send word back to Wyoming about what happened here. Your father will know you're married within the week. Let him know, Charlotte said, finding her voice again. Let him know I chose my own path, that I'm not his to control anymore. The preacher nodded approvingly. The law may recognize your marriage, but your father still has resources. I'd suggest, if you're planning to stay in Leadville, that you establish yourselves quickly. Get work, make connections, become part of the community. The more legitimate you are, the harder it'll be for anyone to claim you're fugitives. It was good advice, and they took it. Over the next 3 weeks, Adam found work in the Matchless mine, Brutal labor that left him exhausted every evening but paid steady wages. Charlotte took in laundry and mending, her hands growing rough from lye soap and constant work. They saved every penny they could, living in their small room at Mrs. Hartwell's, eating simple meals, building a life from nothing but determination and love. Word spread through the mining community about the couple who'd defied a wealthy rancher to be together. Some people viewed them with suspicion, but most saw what Charlotte and Adam were, two people working hard, keeping to themselves, causing no trouble. They made friends slowly. Mrs. Hartwell grew fond of Charlotte, teaching her cooking techniques her mother had never had time to share. Adam's work crew accepted him as one of their own, appreciating his willingness to take on the hardest tasks without complaint. 6 weeks after their wedding, during the first real snowfall of winter, a letter arrived addressed to Mrs. Charlotte Cooper. Charlotte recognized her father's handwriting immediately. She sat in their room holding the unopened letter, her hands trembling. Adam came in from his shift, saw her face, and immediately knelt beside her chair. "From your father?" Charlotte nodded, unable to speak. "You don't have to read it," Adam said gently. "You don't owe him anything, Charlotte. Not your time, not your attention, not your guilt." "I know." Charlotte turned the letter over in her hands. "But I think I need to. Need to know what he has to say now that everything's changed." Adam nodded, sitting back on his heels, giving her space but staying close. Charlotte broke the seal with shaking fingers and unfolded the pages. The letter was long, 3 pages in her father's precise handwriting. Charlotte read it through twice before she could process what it said. Her voice cracked. "He's apologizing. He says he was wrong." Adam's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Wrong?" "He says that when he got word I'd married you, his first reaction was rage. He was ready to send more men, to hire lawyers, to do whatever it took to invalidate the marriage and bring me home." Charlotte's eyes filled with tears as she read. "But then he went through my mother's things, found her diary. She'd written about him, about how he'd become harder after they came west, how he'd started treating everything and everyone as something to control rather than care for. She wrote that she worried what would happen to me when she was gone, whether he'd crush the spirit she'd worked so hard to cultivate in me." Charlotte had to stop, wiping her eyes. Adam moved to sit beside her on the bed, his arm around her shoulders. "She wrote," Charlotte's voice was barely a whisper. "She wrote that if I ever needed to leave, to choose my own path, even if it meant defying him, she'd want me to do it. That she'd be proud of me for having the courage she'd sometimes lacked." "Charlotte," he says reading that broke something in him, made him realize he'd become exactly what she feared, a man so consumed with control that he'd driven away the one person he had left to love. Charlotte looked at Adam, tears streaming down her face. "He's not asking me to come back. He's asking if we'd be willing to accept his apology. If someday, when we're ready, he could meet you properly. Get to know the man I chose." Adam was silent for a long moment. Then, carefully, he said, "What do you want, Charlotte? Not what he wants, not what would make things easier. What do you want?" Charlotte thought about it, about her father, flawed, controlling, damaged by grief and fear, about her mother's wish that Charlotte be free to choose her own path, about the life she and Adam were building, hard but honest and entirely their own. She took a breath. "I want time. I want us to build what we're building here, to get strong enough that his presence or absence doesn't shake us. And then maybe I want to try, not to go back to who I was, but to see if we can find some new relationship that acknowledges who I've become." "That's fair," Adam said. "That's more than fair. You want me to write back to him?" "No." Charlotte set the letter aside, turning to face Adam fully. "I'll write back. I'll tell him we need time, that we're building our own life, that if he wants to be part of it eventually, it'll be on our terms, not his. And I'll tell him," her voice strengthened, "I'll tell him I'm happy, that I chose well, that his daughter is exactly where she's meant to be." The letter she wrote was shorter than her father's, but it was honest. She told him about Leadville, about Adam's work in the mines and her work taking in laundry. She told him they were poor but content, struggling but together. She told him she'd received his apology, and while she couldn't forgive everything immediately, She was willing to consider reconciliation when they were ready. She signed it Charlotte Cooper with no regrets. Winter deepened, snow piling high in the streets of Leadville. Adam came home each night exhausted and sometimes injured. The mines were dangerous work, and not a week went by without someone getting hurt or killed. Charlotte learned to tend his injuries, to have hot food waiting, to be the safe harbor he came home to. They saved money slowly but steadily. By spring, they had enough to consider renting a small house instead of a boarding house room. Nothing grand, just 2 rooms and a kitchen, but theirs. The idea filled Charlotte with excitement she hadn't felt since childhood. 3 months after her first letter, another arrived from her father. This one was different. News of the ranch, mention of how Maria the housekeeper asked after Charlotte constantly. A casual note that he'd been reading the books Charlotte used to love, trying to understand her better. And almost as an afterthought, a bank draft for $100. Not as payment or bribe, the letter said, but as wedding gift he'd failed to give. It was his daughter's right to have something from her family, even if that family was just one stubborn old man trying to learn how to let go. Charlotte cried when she read it, but they were different tears than before. These were tears of hope, of possibility, of a future that might include reconciliation without requiring surrender. "We don't have to accept it," Adam said, looking at the bank draft. "If it feels like control, it's not control." Charlotte folded the letter carefully. "It's an olive branch. And I think I want to accept it. Not because we need it, though God knows we could use it, but because it's Him trying to respect our marriage, to give us something that's ours to do with as we choose." They used the money to rent the little house, to buy furniture, modest but new, and to set aside a small emergency fund. The house became their sanctuary, a place where they were just Charlotte and Adam, not Judge Hale's runaway daughter and her kidnapper, but a married couple building a life together. By summer, Charlotte was pregnant. The discovery came as a surprise. She'd been so focused on survival, on establishing their life in Leadville, that she'd barely noticed the signs, but Dr. Whitman confirmed it, and suddenly everything shifted into even sharper focus. "We're going to be parents," Charlotte said that night, still processing. "Adam, we're going to have a baby." Adam looked terrified and thrilled in equal measure. Are you happy about it?" "Terrified," Charlotte admitted. "But yes, I'm happy. I'm going to be a mother." The thought connected her to her own mother in a way nothing else had since her death. "I wish she could have known. Wish she could meet her grandchild." "Write to your father," Adam suggested gently. "Tell him. Let him be part of this if he wants to be." The letter Charlotte wrote was longer this time, more open. She told her father about the baby, about their house, about the life they were building. She told him she thought of her mother every day, tried to honor her memory by being strong and choosing freely. And she told him that when the baby came, if he wanted to visit, if he could accept Adam as her husband and respect the life they'd built, he would be welcome. His response came faster than any previous letter. He would come, he wrote, not to reclaim or control, but to meet his grandchild, to apologize to Adam in person for the hell he'd put them through, to see for himself that his daughter was genuinely happy. And he wanted to bring something, a gift, papers he'd been working on with his lawyer. Charlotte's daughter was born in March, during a late snowstorm that blanketed Leadville in white. The labor was long and difficult, but when Charlotte finally held her baby, tiny, red-faced, perfect, she understood in a way she never had before why her mother had fought so hard to keep her, to raise her, to give her the strength to choose her own path. "She looks like you," Adam said, his voice thick with emotion as he touched his daughter's tiny hand. "She's perfect, Charlotte. You're both perfect." They named her Sarah Rose. Sarah for Adam's lost love, who'd taught him about courage. Rose for Charlotte's mother, who'd taught her about choice. It felt right, honoring the women who'd shaped them into people capable of building this family. Judge Edmund Hale arrived 2 weeks later, looking older than Charlotte remembered, his silver hair now nearly white. He stood on their porch clutching his hat, and for the first time in Charlotte's memory, he looked uncertain. "Charlotte," he said when she opened the door. May I come in?" Charlotte looked at him, at her father who'd exiled her, who'd sent men hunting for them, who'd made the first months of her marriage a desperate flight. But she also saw the man who'd loved her mother desperately, who'd been crushed by grief, who'd done terrible things from fear of losing the last person he had left to love. "Yes," she said, stepping aside, "but you'll need to meet someone first." She led him to where Adam stood near the fireplace, holding Sarah. Her father and her husband looked at each other for a long moment. Years of anger and misunderstanding thickened the air between them. Then Judge Hale did something Charlotte had never seen him do before. He held out his hand. "Mr. Cooper," he said formally, "I owe you an apology. I was wrong about you, wrong about everything. You're clearly a man of character, and you've made my daughter happier than I ever managed to. I hope you might be willing to let me try to start fresh." Adam shifted Sarah carefully, then took the judge's hand. "For Charlotte's sake and for this little one's sake, I'm willing, but you need to understand, sir, I won't tolerate any attempt to control or dictate. Charlotte and I make decisions together as partners. That's not negotiable." "I understand." The judge's voice was humble in a way Charlotte had never heard. "I'm not here to take over or fix things. I'm here to, if you'll let me, to be family, to know my granddaughter, to support you both however I can, on your terms." Charlotte moved to stand beside Adam, looking between the two most important men in her life. "Then let's start with introductions. Father, meet your granddaughter, Sarah Rose Cooper. Sarah, meet your grandfather." Judge Hale's face crumpled as Adam carefully transferred the baby to his arms. He held Sarah like she was made of spun glass, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. "She has your mother's eyes," he whispered to Charlotte. "The same green, the same spark." They spent the afternoon talking, carefully at first, then more naturally as old wounds began their slow healing. The judge told them about the ranch, about how lonely it had been without Charlotte, about reading her mother's diaries and realizing how badly he'd failed them both. Charlotte told him about their life in Leadville, about the struggles and small victories, about building something from nothing. As the sun began to set, the judge pulled a leather portfolio from his bag. "I brought something, legal documents my lawyer prepared. You'll want to read them carefully, but—" He handed them to Charlotte. "The ranch. I'm deeding half of it to you, Charlotte, in your name alone. Not as something I control, but as your inheritance. Your mother would have wanted you to have it." Charlotte stared at the papers, her hands trembling. "Father, we don't need—" "It's not about need." The judge's voice was firm but gentle. "It's about what's right. The ranch. Your mother and I built it together. Half of it was always hers, and now it should be yours. You can keep it, sell it, visit once a year or never. It's your choice, Charlotte. That's the point. It's your choice." Adam looked at Charlotte. "What do you want to do?" Charlotte thought about it, really thought. The ranch represented her childhood, her mother's memory, the life she'd fled. But it also represented security, possibility, a future for Sarah that didn't involve brutal mining work and constant struggle. She looked at her father. "I want to keep it in the family, but I don't want to live there, not yet. Maybe someday, but right now our life is here. Could you keep managing it? Send us our share of the profits. Let us build our life here until we're ready, if we're ever ready, to come back?" Relief flooded the judge's face. "Of course, whatever you want. And Charlotte—" His voice broke. "Thank you. Thank you for giving me another chance." Over the next year, the tentative reconciliation grew stronger. Judge Hale visited quarterly, always bringing gifts, always respecting boundaries, clearly working hard to be the father Charlotte needed rather than the controlling force he'd been. He and Adam developed a careful friendship built on mutual respect and love for Charlotte and Sarah. The ranch continued to prosper, and the profits it generated allowed Charlotte and Adam to buy their house outright, to save for Sarah's future, to build something substantial. Adam eventually left the mines, using ranch profits to start a small freight business that was less dangerous and more profitable. 5 years after their wedding, Charlotte stood on the porch of their house, no longer tiny, expanded room by room as their family and business grew, watching Sarah play in the yard while a second child, James, napped inside. Adam rode up the street, home from a freight run, his face breaking into a smile when he saw them. "How was Denver?" Charlotte asked as he dismounted, accepting his kiss. Profitable. And I heard something interesting. Adam pulled an envelope from his coat. The territorial governor wants to appoint a new circuit judge for this district. Your father's name came up, but he declined, said he's thinking of retiring, spending more time with his grandchildren. Charlotte laughed, surprised and pleased. That doesn't sound like the man I grew up with. People change. Adam's arms went around her, both of them watching Sarah chase a butterfly. You changed him. We changed him. Showed him that control isn't love, that letting go is sometimes the greatest act of caring. Charlotte leaned back against her husband, feeling the solid warmth of him, the safety and partnership they'd built together. She thought about that terrified girl who'd ridden out of Willow Creek in the darkness, choosing exile over submission. That girl had become this woman, a wife, a mother, a business owner, someone who'd transformed fear and desperation into something beautiful and lasting. Do you ever regret it? She asked. Everything we went through, the running, the fear, the difficulty? Adam was quiet for a moment, considering honestly. I regret that it had to be so hard. I regret the pain it caused, but regret choosing you? Regret the life we built? He turned her in his arms, looking into her eyes with all the love and certainty of their years together. Never. Not for a second. You were worth every hard mile, Charlotte. You're worth everything. Charlotte kissed him, long and deep, a kiss that held 5 years of partnership, of choosing each other daily, of building something that had started in desperation and grown into joy. Sarah's voice interrupted them. Mama, Papa, come see the butterfly. They walked together into the yard, their daughter between them, their son sleeping peacefully inside, their life spread before them like a gift they'd fought for and earned. Somewhere in Wyoming, Judge Edmund Hale sat on the porch of a ranch that would someday belong to his grandchildren, reading his late wife's diaries and learning, finally, what it meant to love by letting go. The story that had begun with a gunshot and an exile, with running and fear and desperation, had ended not with a bang, but with a butterfly, with laughter, with the quiet accumulation of ordinary days that together made an extraordinary life. Charlotte Cooper, no longer Charlotte Hale, stood in the yard of her own home, with the husband she'd chosen and the family they'd created, and felt something she'd been chasing since that first desperate ride into the darkness. She felt free.